Capella flyer here.
Yep, that's for,
Plus 98.
98, yep.
Yes, I believe you still are up here.
Yeah, you're number 5.
We're going to my house while we're here. There's the windows.
Sounds good.
Very cranky day at work today.
I'm sorry I didn't get back to you, by the way. I did see
Oh,
your email.
you saw my email, yeah.
It's one of those
I
days
know.
I tried to get to it.
Because you said, they didn't give me, usually they give me some papers that tell me what's, whatever. And I said, don't worry, Leon, I'll just
You got a hold of him. Yes, he did. He
Yeah.
picked it off. I mean, come on.
And the other day I saw him at Price Chopper, and I said, Leon, did you sell something this year that I need to know about?
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. And he said he did think of me in October, and then he forgot.
Technical difficulties, we need batteries. Is it
Uh-oh.
double or triple? Two triple.
Okay. I've got all my papers. All of them.
Oh, and you got my email I sent back to you, stuff to look at, right?
Yes.
Just to read before you come talk to me. You still need to buy
Yeah,
it.
that, I don't think I qualify for the solo.
Yeah.
Because the solo needs a virus approval.
Oh, yeah. Well,
And
but
it could take
actually,
2 years.
yeah, and you don't wanna go that route. Okay, so it's clearly to save the most. The key is to look at the descriptions and see what saves you the most. And simple, of course, you can only shelter like 13,000 or 16,000 or something. So,
And, yeah,
yeah. But, does your one still work?
yeah.
Mike, no.
Now I
If
can't
it's
update
low
this.
enough, you
We
can always
updated
do
it.
a spousal life.
Yeah, also
Remember,
you
she
went
got
and
it.
updated it
On
on.
here, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to get your numbers together, really. Yep. Okay.
It's scary.
But it's stuff to, easy to read. This is how it works. I need to get some red paper and just use it as dividers between cases.
I had to do paper clips.
Paper
I had to try and,
fly.
I
You know,
know
if
they
it's
do.
fat, they just fly right off.
I know.
He's coming.
You were supposed to. Dean. On this one, you may just want to clarify
Because the applicant is
the.
not,
No,
okay.
it changed.
How did it change?
It's a the court. This is Kimberly Davis.
Is the executive?
It's
of
the
state?
executive of the
state,
Yeah,
okay.
there's a court.
Yeah, right, she's the county treasurer appointed to be,
Correct.
she's being administrator, she's not
Correct.
an executive, okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
administrator.
Yeah.
So you may want to just clarify that.
And she's, what is her last name now? She married Jerry Gagne. She,
Oh.
Kimberly Gagne, is she Kimberly Davis?
I'd say Davis. Yeah.
I think it might, and again, I don't have papers.
It's like 713. Here. Are you're all good? Okay. I'll call the meeting to order. Planning Board meeting for Monday, December 23rd, 2019. If everyone can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay,
I'll start off with first item on the agenda. This is Planning Board Application Number 2019-14, 2, 4, and 10 George Street. It's a request to subdivide an existing parcel of .41 acres into two parcels of .12 acres and .29 acres, located at 2, 4, and 10 George Street. The applicant is Kimberly Davis on behalf of
State of
The estate of Rudolph.
Okay.
Rudolph.
And the plan preparer is AEDA. I will be recusing myself from this application since my firm AEDA is representing.
Okay, so this project was heard by the planning board in October. It was determined to be a minor subdivision. They're now back for final approval. Again, this is a proposal to subdivide a property on 2410 George Street into two parcels for transfer of ownership and tax purposes. So here's an overview of the site. This is the parcel on George Street off of White Street in South Plattsburgh. Here's our zoning map showing the properties in the industrial district. It's the current use is pre-existing non-conforming. Here's some site photos. Primary structure on the west side of the property, currently multifamily housing with a repair shop in the rear. And this is a structure on the east side of the residence, or the property. It's a single family residence, currently owner occupied and will be subdivided from the other structures. And this is the final subdivision plat, showing the new lot line in yellow. So it'll create two new lots to separate multiple primary structures. We have all the necessary information to deem this a final plan, including meets and bounds, dimensions, utilities, etc. The project was required to get a number of variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Those variances were achieved at the November 18th meeting under variance number 2227. We've asked the applicant to reference those variance numbers on the plan. Other than that, I didn't have any major comments for this project. We have completed seeker part 2, and no significant adverse impacts were identified. So it's recommended the planning board find a negative determination for this project. I'll open up to Mike for any further comment.
Thank you, Milena. That pretty much describes it all. If you recall, this is a subdivision to close an estate, and it was originally 4 deeded parcels, which by the assessor were combined into one tax map parcel. So in essence, we are looking to divide that one tax map parcel into 2 saleable lots, which the right-hand lot with the single-family residence more or less was one of the pre-existing single parcels. We're modifying the original lot line slightly to avoid encroachments, and we presented this to the zoning board and received the area variances necessary due to side yard setbacks and insufficient lot area within the zone. All other nonconformities were deemed pre-existing nonconformances. Therefore, we are hopeful to get subdivision approval to close the estate.
Okay, so I need to open a public hearing at this point. Okay, we're gonna open a public hearing regarding any kind of public comment you'd like to make about this. It's now open. I don't know what time it is. We have no clock. Okay, hopefully this is right. 7. Okay, 7:07. The public hearing's open. Anybody like to speak at the public hearing? No one chooses to speak. Public hearing is closed at 7:08. So now I need a motion regarding the short form seeker that we are going to approve tonight.
I'll make a motion to approve the short form seeker as presented by staff.
And no adverse impact?
No.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Are we doing voice vote, roll vote?
We typically do roll, however you want.
Roll.
We do roll.
Roll vote?
Marcia Gilbert,
Yes.
Rick Perry,
Yes.
Reg Carter,
Yes.
Loretta Ransma.
Yes.
Okay. Short form seeker is passed. The next motion would be,
Can I ask a question
Yes.
before we make a motion?
Sure.
You referenced this site having 4 separate deeds,
Correct.
but that the assessor combined the deeds for taxing purposes, but the deeds were never actually adjoined?
Right, so there was never a common deed created for the property. It was
Okay.
just combined by tax roll with the clerk. So the 4 deeds technically still stand on their own for the individual lands. But it's my understanding if adjacent properties are owned by a common party, there may be a time frame involved, but the assessor and the clerk can combine them into a single tax parcel.
For taxing purposes?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so with this approved subdivision, you will create 2 separate deeds that distinctly identify each of the 2 parcels?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So, our next, approve the minor subdivision?
Yep.
Okay, okay, pardon me, we're dealing with new papers in front of us this month. Are there words I'm supposed to read out
Motion
loud?
to accept resolution number, whatever, 2019-14.
Okay, where's the resolution that I'm saying?
The new six subdivision to 19.
I just wanna make sure, this is so different. Okay. You know, whereas,
There you go.
Right,
whereas,
so you
it's
you
like,
just have to
what
make a
is
motion
this?
to accept the
Okay.
resolution
Okay,
number.
Sure it is.
I'm still looking. Show me where. Okay. I need a motion to accept resolution number 2019-14B. Not made by me.
Motion to approve the,
Seems like these people might like to actually hear what that motion is. This is kind of strange to have a motion that is not out loud. Am I supposed to-
It's not necessary.
Would any of you in the audience like to actually hear the motion? Nobody cares, okay. Okay, so Rick has made the motion, and who's seconding it?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll.
Rick Perry,
yes.
Reg Carter,
Yes.
Loretta Riesma,
Yes.
Melissa Gilbert.
Yes. Subdivision approved.
Thank you very much.
So Marissa, I mean, I guess we could make a statement that says motion to accept resolution number 19 dash, whatever the number is, for
For
the
the
2410 George
subdivision.
Street minor subdivision. Final review. So you could just maybe expand on what exactly the resolution is for.
It's pages, it's
I know.
pages.
We'll get used to it. We should have talked about it earlier when we didn't have time.
Yes,
But-
okay? Good luck with all that new paperwork, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna recuse myself now,
Okay.
right? Am I
No,
next?
no,
Not
no,
yet.
you're not next.
Next,
You're
okay.
not next.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to item
148
number,
US Oval.
yep, moving on to item number 2, this is planning board application 2019-23 for 148 US Oval. The project is a request to replace all existing vinyl windows and hardwood trim with replacement vinyl windows and hardwood trim at 148 US Oval, which is within a historic district. SHPO review required. Applicant is Tenzin Dorji. And same as plan preparer. You're open to speak.
Do you want me to go through it or no? Do you want me to go through it?
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
she
Go
talks
ahead.
first.
I don't have to, I know we've heard this
No,
already.
go ahead.
Okay, so like Jim said, this project was heard last month, but we did not have SHPO coordination, so since then, we've gone to SHPO, received correspondence from them. They did approve the vinyl window replacement with vinyl windows. They did have a few suggestions in regards to going back to the original wood windows with the 2/2 panels. I understand the applicant does not want to do that, and I don't think it's recommended at this time due to the fact that this building is part of a community of 9 buildings with the same windows. So I guess at this time, if you want to expand any further on your plans for replacement, go ahead.
And your
Well,
name?
Yes, of course. My name is Carlton Brown, and Tenzin Dorji asked me to sit in for him because he's out of town again this week. Hopefully, this is the end of that. But last month when I came in here, we had discussed it. I guess you folks had put it on the table for this meeting for today. I guess there was a correspondence between Tenzin and the HOA.
Yep.
Which is what you folks had requested. I have that paperwork, and from what I understand, everything has been approved on their end, providing that, in coordination with you folks. I don't know if you had gotten the paperwork.
Yeah.
I would assume that you have.
It's
So-
not in your packets, just, so you know, it came in after the packets went out.
So based on the information that you folks have and the information that was sent to you from the HOA, we're hoping to get this settled so we can get the windows changed in the spring.
Okay.
Could we read the correspondence into the minutes, please?
Sure.
From the HOA.
Yes.
I didn't print it, it's up on my computer.
I don't think I have it as part of the presentation. Are you saying you wanna see that letter right now before any approvals? So we can go run and get it.
Could we please?
Sure, absolutely.
Because
If you want me to
being,
read it in, I can just log in twice.
Okay.
yeah, being
Shalice
one
can
of
read it in.
9, if we should have, in the future, the same request,
Yep,
I'd like it to be consistent.
yep.
Mm.
It's part of the file
Sorry,
right now.
this came in late last week. So.
As far as seeker is concerned, while she's looking that up, I'll just make the statement that we have reviewed seeker part 1, completed seeker part 2, and find no significant adverse impacts. So recommended the planning board find a negative determination for the project.
So it's not not a written statement, it's a work request checklist where he checked off other, replace all windows, contractors, self-replacement. And then it just has a check mark for approved, denied, or reason, it says approved. And they also require him to replace the damaged shrub on the left side in front of the property.
Did I hear you say that he has approval to replace all windows?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's not a full statement, just a checklist of what he requested and what was approved.
So the record to be clear that our approval is for all windows,
Yes.
not specifically what Mr. Brown had.
Yeah,
Okay.
our plan all
Which
along
is
has been
good.
to replace all the windows.
Perfect.
So,
Mhm.
yeah.
That way you won't be coming back here every other month.
That's right.
We like
Which is okay.
that.
So we're all set.
So we, public hearing first.
So we do.
Yeah.
Any others? Rick, you're satisfied?
Yes.
You're set? Okay.
Yes.
Any other board comments?
No.
Okay, we do have a public hearing associated with this application. I'll open up the public hearing at 7:17 for anybody in the public that may have a comment. Okay, if there's no comment, then we'll close the public hearing. Moving on to the short form seeker for the project. We do have a draft resolution number 2019-23A with a proposed finding of notice of no significant environmental impact by this project. Do we have a motion to accept the findings of seeker draft resolution? Motion by Reg,
Second.
Okay, so seeker draft resolution, where did you see that?
seeker determination. There you go. And then at the,
And the next one is the next one?
yeah,
Okay.
go, at the end, it tells you
Okay.
the recommended.
Okay.
Okay. So there was motion by Reg, second by
It was Rick.
Rick. Okay, if there's no further comment, all in favor?
Aye.
Oh,
Sorry,
roll.
roll call?
Rick Carter,
Yes.
Loretta Rietsma,
Yes.
Jim Abdullah,
Yes.
Melissa Gilbert,
Yes.
Perry.
Yes.
draft resolution for approval of the application. It's resolution number 2019-23B.
Okay, let me try this, okay. I'd like to make a motion adopting resolution number 2019-23B for 148 US Oval Window Replacement Project 2019 to replace all existing vinyl windows and hardwood trim with replacement vinyl windows and hardwood trim as disclosed in their application as part of the historic site review.
Okay, so we have a motion, do I have a second?
A second.
Second by Rick. Any further comment? If not, roll call.
Loretta Riasima,
Yes.
Jim Obella,
Yes.
Martha Glover,
Yes.
Rick Perry,
Yes.
Red Carter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave here, I gotta get all the papers though.
Okay. Moving on to item number 3, this is planning board application number 2019-25, 98 Ohio Avenue. This is a request to replace 2 existing circa 1980 wood windows with replacement wood windows at 98 Ohio Avenue, which is within a historic district. SHPO review is required. Applicant is Clinton County Historical Association. Plan preparer is Jerry Fabro? Oh, okay, okay. Okay.
Alrighty.
Can we, I'm sorry, can you just state for the record that Marissa has recused herself?
Oh,
That I've recused myself, because I'm gonna talk about the window.
okay.
Just state it. Yeah, we're good.
You're good?
As
Okay,
long as it's mentioned.
okay.
All right, so again, this is a request to replace existing aluminum plywood windows with hardwood trim with aluminum plywood windows and hardwood trim in the Oval Historic District at 98 Ohio Avenue, which is the home of the Clinton County Historical Association. So this is an overview of the site highlighted in yellow on the south side of the Oval near New York Road. This is our zoning map showing the property is in the RC2 residential district. Historic overlay map showing the property is in the historic district on the former Plattsburgh Air Force Base. And here's the SHPO inventory form referencing the building as the band barracks. It's distinguished by the H plan with 2 gable ends facing the street and decorative features including 4 corbelled chimneys and molded cornices. There's also mention of the 2/2 windows with segmental arches which do not exist anymore. They've, like the application said, were replaced in the 80s with single pane windows. This is a really cool old historic photo that was provided by the applicant. And some site photos. So this is the front of the building, and you can see the existing wood windows with wood trim that need replacement. And just another image of one of those windows that will be replaced. So this is the cut sheet provided by the applicant for the new windows. That will be a double hung wood window painted to match the existing windows. SHPO has been consulted on the project and provided a letter stating the project will have no adverse effect on historical and cultural resources. We have reviewed Secret Part 1 and determined this to be an unlisted action. We've also completed Secret Part 2 and no significant adverse impacts were identified. So it's a recommendation that the planning board find a negative determination for this project. Now I'd like to ask the applicant to speak further on the project.
I think you have most all the information that you need in front of you. I'm here to answer questions. Marissa can answer questions also. Do you have something that you would like to?
I just wanted to explain the state of our windows. Having been involved with the building since 2006, I can tell you what the windows are like. For instance, the windows in the director's office, if I bang on the side of the sash, the entire sash will just pop right out because the tracks don't work anymore. Most of our windows are actually caulked shut to take care of the drafts and everything, and because we are a museum, we always have the blinds closed. We also actually have an extra layer of UV protection. We are a museum, we can't let light in, So the windows are there, but they're kind of inconvenient to us because we can't use them as windows, not like somebody's house. So as you can actually see, do you see the right window there? That's sort of what we call the docent room, and sometimes those blinds are actually open, but because we have some artwork in that room, we have to still do UV, an attempt at UV blocking, and that is a thin film that is falling down from the top that we put on the inside of the window to try to block some of the UV rays from coming into that room. Most of those other windows, as you can see, they're completely curtained off. You can't even see inside those windows. Many of them are cracked, and then there's fog inside because the seal's broken, aside from the fact that the tracks don't work. But at the amount we're spending per window to get really good windows, this is gonna be a process over time. This window that we're using is wood. This is the inside you're looking at, okay, wood on the inside, and aluminum clad wood on the outside because we don't want to get involved with outside maintenance. It's really, really hard for us. You can see the state, if you go back a couple of pictures, the trim on the outside of those windows hasn't been painted since when we built the building in 2006. And isn't likely to.
Probably not.
Yeah, keep painting. And I can tell you in my office, a window that was, when I do the accounting, this office, a window that was closed, but because we recently got a server, and the server throws off so much heat that now we have to put an air conditioner in my window. When they closed it for the year, they have this weird little hole that I just noticed, where the corner of the window is completely rotted away, so I stuffed some things. We need new windows. So we're hoping you approve these, SHPO approve these. The programmatic agreement says replacing like with like is okay. This is actually sort of like with better. Still wood, but aluminum clad. And when we wrote the letter to SHPO, I think you got the answer from SHPO, but you don't have the actual letter. We made it very clear we wanted their permission to, in a sense, approve the fact that we're gonna replace all the windows in the building in the same manner.
That was one of the questions that I had. The application that you submitted to the planning board was a request to only 2 of the windows.
We're
but I
only
was
going with 2.
But I was assuming you're looking for approval for all of them to not have to come back to the planning
It'd
board.
be nice if we could say, if you would say, as long as they continue to produce this window,
Right.
okay, and we don't have to switch models, and we can still afford the amount per year that budgeting it, and all the windows are pretty much the same. We'd like to have permission to not have to come back regarding windows.
These windows will allow us to actually remove blinds. They are designed to keep the light from deteriorating anything within the room because of the type of seal that there is on the window, the type of,
Gas
yeah.
and the film and whatever, we're getting everything.
Whereas the current windows are just, they let everything in. So we do have to keep them covered.
What year were the current windows installed?
We
In
think
the 80s.
between 80 and 85, the original
I
buildings,
presume 1980s.
1905, and we think the
Yes.
windows probably got replaced in the middle somewhere. That maybe building built 1905, maybe in the 40s, they replaced the windows where we lost the 2/2 and lost the, I'm not sure when we lost the curve at the top, but that's just plywood or whatever at the top.
What are the 2 windows that you're actually looking to replace?
The two, if you go to the front porch, it's the right and the left, because they're the windows somebody sees the closest when they come up on our front porch. And I'm not sure what and the order of replacement after that would probably be by whichever ones are cracked first, the worst ones. And again, like I just discovered this rotten hole in my office, maybe that'll be one of the next, the director's window that pops out, that might be one of the next. It's triage.
Will you be looking at grills?
No,
Or is
and
that
this
just?
I don't know why they have the grill here. He gave us a model with a grill, but it's just one light over one light.
Just one line, okay.
Because if it takes us 20 years to replace all these windows, we certainly don't wanna have a mix and match
Right.
over 20 years until we're done.
And in the meantime, the light over light matches up pretty well with what we have in existence now, so.
I think she had provided, no, maybe not, but you could, we thought just having the physical sample here and the book
What
would
is
be enough to show you.
the color that you're choosing for the
Yeah, the
aluminum?
color is that kind of, our outside trim is that kind of same cream color
Beige.
that's all around the base, so that's what we went with. I'm not sure what the name of that color is.
I can tell you, it's oval.
Oval.
It is. Because we did that at Eastoval.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Does the arch over the window also have to be replaced, or does that remain
No,
intact?
that's already framed in, so we would just go with the oblong window, and then we're probably gonna have to pay somebody to paint the wood trim that surrounds the arch and the extra outsides.
Are the windows a contributing architectural feature of the building?
Just that they're nice and symmetric. I mean, it's
Yeah,
a
but
really,
is it identified in the list?
well, you
I
can bring that
believe so,
page
it's right
back
here.
up.
Yeah, my eyes on it.
think-
It says Palladian window, format with blind central section and fan 2/2 windows with segmental arches.
Yeah, so this was in 78?
Yes.
Yeah, so sometimes after that, gone. So.
So
I don't have any
historically,
airforce.
the programmatic agreement took the place of any changes that would have been made, and as of the date of the programmatic agreement,
Right.
Believe.
we were able to revert back to the window replacement that's there,
Yeah.
because they were done previous.
The two windows, if we go back, yeah, the two windows down, at the basement level,
We're not doing anything with those, and those were.
are they a
replaced by the-
security issue?
No, they lock,
They do?
Yeah,
Okay, and they lock and
absolutely.
it
All
holds? Okay.
and everybody's under strict orders not to open them. All the
Well, I don't know what would
volunteers.
be down there, but it just,
Oh, yeah, it's a fully working basement.
Right.
Lots of volunteers doing whatever, storage, collections work. You need to come to the museum and actually take a
and,
look.
oh, I have, I've
Yeah,
been.
Yeah.
But there's no issue of, moisture leaking into
No.
those windows, really? Wow.
Those are actually, they appear to be much newer than the current larger windows.
Right, I think
They've been
that
replaced
we have
since.
happened the
Okay.
last. Okay, but they do all lock.
And do they get
once
snow
the
piled up on, I mean, I would imagine snow piles up on them in the
Doesn't
winter,
seem to be
and
an
it doesn't
issue.
be, wow, that's fabulous, okay.
What we do on the inside, kind of irrelevant to you guys, the width of the foundation is very thick.
Right.
So even though that's a double pane window, there's some weird venting of heat effects. In other words, almost like a chimney effect in the window well. So because the heat tends to just fly up this chimney-like thing in the window well, we have a layer of plexi on the inside that's screwed to a frame. So it actually, in a sense, makes triple pane, except
okay.
not triple pane in the classic sense where there's only 3/4 of an inch in between. There's a big 2.5-foot section
Right.
that keeps all that heat from flying up the window well. So nobody's gonna come in through the windows, because then they have to come through a layer of plexi.
Yeah, okay.
Rick, you wanted to flash back to the
Yeah, could I just see
Sure,
the,
which slide, I'm sorry.
the picture with that?
historical
You can
photo?
see the
it's
two over
2
there.
over 2.
Yeah, no, I'm curious about the building features, and how much that's changed, you
Well, of
know,
course, the
like-
porch is gone,
Yeah.
long gone.
Exactly, that's,
And there's pictures, like this is the post office, and then we have some pictures later. It's not really apparent when the porch went from being this kind of very cool porch to our porch that we just replaced a couple of years ago that was really ugly. But again, this would be kind of a maintenance nightmare for us if we had all that wood and a second story porch, and, because again, we got a lot of locked storage rooms on that second story, that collections, you know. And again, it looks also, somebody mentioned that it looks like, you see the side porch on the right? That's people going in a little, kind of a way for them to go in and file past and get their mail. So I'm thinking those windows at some point were doors and then became windows again.
Mm.
Because I don't think they're in a window, though they might be passing by a window, to get their mail, I don't know. We don't know.
Does the board have any other comments, questions? If not, we do have a public hearing associated with this application. I'll open the public hearing at 7:34. For any comments anybody in the public may have. Okay, if there's no comments, we'll close the public hearing. Move on to the, we have a short form seeker associated with the project. And we do have a draft resolution number 2019-25A with a draft finding of no significant environmental impact associated with the project. One quick question. The applicant is requested to replace all windows over time, so we would want to modify this resolution
Yep.
from what's stated as request to replace two existing. I mean, they're replacing two existing windows now with the future option of
Okay.
all
Placing all of
windows.
them, yes.
Do I have a motion for that?
Motion to approve resolution number 2019-25A as drafted with the exception of including replacement of all windows.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Loretta. Any further comment? If not, roll call?
Jim Abdullah,
Yes.
Rick Perry,
Yes.
Fred Carter,
Yes.
Loretta Rienzo.
Yes.
Okay. We do have a second resolution number 2019-25B for same request to replace two existing windows now with the future option of replacing all windows as proposed and accepting the application as presented. Do I have a
I'll make a
motion?
motion to approve resolution number 2019-25B. Based on the presentation in both public hearings, with the modification to include all windows versus the initial requested replacement of two windows.
Do you have a second to that?
Second.
Second by Reg. Any further comment? Roll call?
Rick Perry,
Yes.
Fred Carter,
Yes.
Loretta Rienzo,
Yes.
Jim Abdullah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the light on that is gonna stop UV rays from going in
Yeah,
that damage?
it blocks UV rays, it's got the gas in between that is better in terms of heat and cold and whatever. Everything that you could buy, we got.
They don't
Except for the
guarantee
price
that
tag, it's amazing.
It will break, however.
This is just the quote of the building inspectors. We filled out a long form seeker, because that's what they do. But we didn't need it anymore, but we did.
Okay.
So,
I've lost my pen. Uh-oh. And we'll be back for the front door. We got a $5,000 grant from Billy Jones to do the front door.
so I'll let you address how you handle these next applications. So items number 4, 5, and 6, which are planning board's application 2019-24, 2019-11, and 2019-10 will be presented next. These are items, once again, that I will recuse myself as chair on, based on my involvement with the parking lot projects down in the city.
Okay, narrate. Narrate.
narrate
That's
already?
your job.
Okay.
Introduce
So
and narrate.
I'll read the project description. So this is project number 2019-24, 22 Durkee Street minor subdivision. It's a request to subdivide an approximate 5.38 acre lot into two parcels, each rate an approximate 0.719 acre parcel, and an approximate 4.66 acre developable parcel separated by Broad Street, located on Durkee Street with public water and public sewer, zoned central business district, tax map parcel number 207.20-7-15. Owner applicant, City of Plattsburgh, the engineer is RMS. This is just a sketch plan review. Okay, so no formal votes are happening tonight. Again, this is just sketch informational tonight. But I wanted to make a statement that the next three agenda items are associated projects and must be heard, considered in the order they are presented on the agenda. So the first up is the Durkee Street minor subdivision, which is simply separating the Broad Street parking lot from the larger Durkee Street parcel. As you can see, the lot is actually naturally separated by Broad Street here. This is simply a formal administrative process to create, the Broad Street lot is lot 1, Durkee Street lot is lot 2. Here is our zoning map showing the properties in the central business district. Historic overlay map showing neither of the lots are in the historic district downtown. And some site photos. So this image is standing on the corner of Durkee Street and Bridge Street with the municipal parking lot on the right. Next, this is looking south. I know it was a little bright out today. Looking into the Durkee parking lot. And this image is standing on Durkee Street looking east, northeast of the parking lot, all of which will be lot 2 as part of this minor subdivision. And here's an image of the southern half of the tax map parcel separated by Broad Street, known as the Broad Street parking lot, which will be lot 1 of the proposed minor subdivision. Just another image of the Broad Street parking lot. And this is the subdivision plat, showing the boundaries of the two new lots. Lot 1 being the Broad Street parking lot, and lot 2 with the existing Gateway Building parking garage, the former home of the Plattsburgh Farmers and Crafters Market, and the municipal parking lot. So the zoning table has been provided, and there are a number of deviations from the requirements of the underlying zoning district, but all of those deviations were previously approved under the existing PUD. I believe the approval happened back in 2004. So no new deviations are being requested from this minor subdivision, and no variances are required. The only review comments I had for this plan were pretty simple. Again, it's just updating the zoning table to reflect lot references in a more clear manner. For example, adding notes to lot 2 that the bulk area calculations are existing conditions, and then lot 2A and B are proposed conditions, which are not happening under this subdivision, but it's the same map for both the minor subdivision and the PUD subdivision. So the applications share a zoning table, so I just want to make sure all the references are very clear in that. Other than that, we've asked the surveyor to update the plan to more accurately show the location of the sewer line on lot 2. Other than that, staff has reviewed the secret part 1 that was submitted with the project and will utilize the generic environmental impact statement that has been prepared to cumulatively review all of the downtown revitalization initiative projects, including the development of this Durkee Street lot, to review the project and its potential impacts. So no secret determination is being made tonight, just a statement that an EAF has been prepared, and before final review, we will use the final environmental impact statement to make that determination. So I'll open it up to if there's any more comments.
Not on this application. I will say that it's been a long road to get to this point, and as Melanie said, that we have a GEIS process underway. We expect that process to be completed sometime in January or February of 2020. As all of the next 3 projects are related to one degree or another, I would like to introduce all of the folks here who are prepared to speak on different aspects of those projects. First, we have Charles Gottlieb from Whiteman, Osterman, and Hanna, who are the attorneys for prime companies. Aaron Obius from RMS, who is here on behalf of the city to speak to the subdivision on the PUD establishment involved in these applications. Gail Henderson King of White and Burke, who is the city's consultant for the Durkee Street project as a whole. Deb Osterhout from Prime Companies. Turner Bradford from McFarland Johnson, who is Prime Company's engineer for the Durkee Street mixed-use development that will occupy one of the lots to be created. And Stephen McKenzie from McKenzie Architects, who is Prime Company's architect for the project.
Any questions on this?
I just have a procedural question.
Sure.
Can we take the testimony of each of their expertise and apply it to all three requests?
Absolutely, but just as a reminder, this request is simply to subdivide this parcel, so you're not looking at the site plan at this time, or any of the deviations that are being requested in the next application. This is literally cutting off the Broad Street lot from the main lot. That's all this application is doing. So as far as your questions are concerned to the applicant, I think you just need to focus simply on the subdivision itself and not the other associated projects at this time.
I guess my question was, rather than them repeat their testimony, can we just have them make a presentation that we can make reference to presentation being applied as each of these come up for
Sure.
consideration?
Yep.
Would that make it easier?
It could, I mean, or you guys could ask questions and then the appropriate
Okay.
person would respond based on their expertise.
Well, I think as you mentioned, this is a pretty small piece
Yes.
compared
This
to
first part is.
the next chunks, the next two chunks we're gonna look at.
Right.
So, and since we do no vote here on this issue, can we just go on to the next?
You can, but procedurally, it's
Okay.
preferential for you to accept the draft resolution that was prepared for you. So you would still accept the resolution, which is a sketch plan resolution. It's much different than the final ones you previously reviewed. So all this is saying is that the planning board has accepted the application. We've reviewed the basic subdivision layout. The project will review the comments provided by staff and then come back with responses to those comments. So that's what that resolution is outlining. So you would make a motion now to accept that resolution, and then you can move forward.
I have one question.
Sure.
On the, what are we calling the lot on the?
Lot 1.
On the south lot, okay,
Yep.
lot 1. Are the dimensions of that lot changing at all from the dimensions that exist there right
No.
now? Okay.
Nope.
So there's no change in any of the dimensions?
the-
It's literally just,
As far as the lot size is concerned, no. The proposed Broad Street parking lot will change a little bit, I think,
Right.
for an increase in parking
right,
capacity.
yeah, I was just talking
But as far as
about
lot
the
size
size of
goes,
the
no.
land. Yeah, okay, that was my only question.
So it was, before it was just one lot separated by a
It
public
was,
street?
I believe it was put together as one lot to get the minimum 5 acres in the previously approved PUD.
Right,
So
right.
now we're just separating it back out because we don't need it.
Right. Okay.
And it isn't relevant that when these lots were originally put together, that the requirement for a PUD was 5 acres.
Yep.
And now the current requirement is 3 acres.
Correct.
Okay. And that has no impact on the way these are in this proposal.
No. So the project will have to go in front of the, which we'll discuss for the next application, to amend the boundary UD, which currently includes that parking lot. That'll be part of the special use permit.
No change to, I guess there is a change. Should know that's the former oil site is now included.
It's already been merged with this lot.
Okay.
It's not a separate lot anymore.
I'm trying to create the distinction between the previous and the current requirement.
Sure. Right
So
now, this is
that's
all
the-
one big tax
The
parcel.
inclusion is,
Yep.
okay.
Okay, so somebody needs to make a motion to adopt resolution 2019-11.
24?
24?
Yep.
Yeah, it's 2019-24.
Well, this says 11 at the top of the page. Why are we,
I'm looking at 24.
It's 24. 11 is the next one.
okay,
For the Q in the subdivision.
I'm looking. I'm looking.
I'll make a motion to accept,
I don't know where it is.
Make a motion to accept resolution number, is it 1924 or 2019-24?
2019.
2019-24, to accept the sketch plan and proceed to the detailed preliminary plan.
And can you also make a motion to categorize this as a minor subdivision?
Yes, and to classify this as a minor subdivision per the zoning code article 2, section 300-5.
Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Roll?
Plattsburgh,
Yes.
Ryder Renshaw,
Yes.
Melissa Gilbert,
Yes.
Rick Barry.
Yes.
Go.
Next?
Okay, take it away. So item number 5, 2019-11, this is again 22 Durkee Street. This is the PUD subdivision. It's a request to create a new planned unit development by subdividing and amending the boundaries of an existing planned unit development located on Durkee Street with public water and public sewer, zone commercial, tax map parcel number 207.20-7-15, owner applicant, City of Plattsburgh, engineer RMS. Again, this is at sketch plan review. So before we jump into this, I know it might be arduous for me to read through this, but I wanted to read out loud and for the record to make sure everybody's on the same page, the definition of a planned unit development that is straight from our city code. So it is defined as a subdivision plat or plats approved pursuant to City Code Chapter 300, subdivision of land, in which the minimum lot size requirements, minimum yard requirements, and minimum open space requirements as specified in Schedule 2 of this chapter of the City Code, and in which the maximum number of structures and dwelling units on a lot as specified in Section 360.18 of this chapter of the City Code, and any amendments thereto may be varied to provide an alternative permitted method for the layout, configuration, and design of lots, buildings, and structures, roads, utility lines, and other infrastructure, parks, and landscaping in order to preserve the natural and scenic qualities of open lands. The purpose of a planned unit development shall be to enable and encourage flexibility of design and development of land in such a manner as to preserve the natural and scenic qualities of open lands. So again, as stated, this is a request to subdivide a proposed amended PUD into 2 lots. The project will require a special use permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals to amend the boundaries of the PUD, which currently includes the Broad Street parking lot and does not include the highway oil lot. So as the yellow outline here will now be the boundary of the PUD, or the requested boundary of the PUD, which will meet the 3-acre minimum in the central business district. I believe the project will be in front of the ZBA in January for information purposes only, with hopes to achieve that special use permit in February. All these slides for the minors, but just for the record, I'll go through it really quick. Again, this is the site in the business district. Historic map showing no historic properties on the site. Again, same photo standing on the corner of Durkee Street with the parking lot to the left, which will be Lot 2B as part of this PUD subdivision. This is looking east at the parking lot from Bridge Street towards the Saranac River. I know there were some concerns from the board and the public in regards to the view shed, so I just wanted to take this photo to show that at this point, even though it's an open parking lot, you still can't see the river due to the topography of the site. Again, this is looking south at the parking lot towards the Gateway building and the farmer's market. This is the current farmer's market, which will be part of Lot 2B. Again, as I said earlier, this lot was previously approved as a PUD for the development of the Gateway building and parking garage as Phase 1, with future development identified for future phases. So this application is simply in front of the ZBA to amend those boundaries via the special use permit, in front of you to subdivide that large Lot 2 into 2 lots, Lot 2A and 2B, for purposes of sale and private development. The lots are identified here on this slide. Lot 2A, which will include the Gateway building, the garage and riverfront from Broad Street to Bridge Street, And Lot 2B will include the municipal parking lot and former highway oil lot parcel. The subdivision will create new lot lines. The bulk area requirement deviations associated, UD is defined in our ordinance as a subdivision for greater latitude and development. We can go through. The project also did a really great narrative outlining all of those deviations and have under consideration of the variance if they were to achieve a variance from the ZBA. So here's their deviation table, line what they're requesting, but clearly that's not showing up here. So the project is requesting deviations from the front, side, and rear setbacks and building height requirements. The front yard setback for a 5-story building in the central business district is 15 feet. The project is requesting a 9-foot setback on Durkee Street and a 3-foot setback on Bridge Street. As you're aware, most of the buildings on Durkee and Bridge Street are at 0 feet. So the applicant would like to have the building, incorporated into the streetscape to create that sense of walkability in downtown that currently exists. The side yard setback deviation at 2 feet will allow for more open space along the Saranac River Walk. And the rear setback deviation at 5 feet is due to the location of the former Plattsburgh Farmer and Crafters Market near the lot line, which is pre-existing. As part of the application, that Farmers and Crafters Market is being identified as future commercial development and civic space. So the lot line being that close, we don't believe will have a detrimental effect to the neighborhood. The final deviation being requested is the building height. The building is proposed to be 5 stories. I have a picture of it. Here we go. The building is proposed to be 5 stories tall at 65 feet. 14 stories is allowed in this district. And as far as calculation goes, in the 65-foot request in this district, to calculate the allowance for height, it's the number of stories times 12, so 60 feet would be allowed. They're requesting 65, so it's a deviation of 5 feet. The ICB building next door, just as reference, is 4 stories, and so is Ashley's Furniture. I don't know, I think this one. This is a really cool overview showing the site plan in relation to the proposed arts park, the Connection Arts Walk, and the River Walk. And I showed you some, and also the reconfiguration of Durkee Street and the angled parking. And this is one of the renderings, so you can visually see the proposed building setbacks and heights. This is a view of the proposed development from the corner of City Hall Place and Bridge Street. It's a view of the proposed building from the intersection of Durkee Street and Bridge Street. So it'd be a 9-foot or a 3-foot deviation here, setback, and 9 foot along Durkee Street. And obviously the 65 feet. The view of the building looking down Bridge Street. And lastly, a view of the proposed development and renovated former farmers market from Durkee Street, and also the Arts Park connector path here down to the Riverwalk. And this is the PUD plat showing the new lot lines to create Lot 2A and Lot 2B. And then a list of the deviations down on that table on the bottom left. Again, 1 setback deviation is requested for Lot 2A, and 4 setback deviations and 1 height deviation for Lot 2B. Again, the narrative that the project provided outlines, why these deviations would meet the guidelines for a variance. Other than that, I had a few comments regarding updating the zoning table on the plan to reflect the deviations requested as part of the PUD subdivision. We've asked, obviously, for any easements that are going to be required. As you can see, there's a few utility lines that run between Lot 2A and 2B. I think this one's for stormwater. There are additional sewer lines that run between the 2 lots. And obviously, all of the electrical transformers up here will need easements for those as well. So we'll have to have draft versions of those before final review. we reviewed secret part 1, and same comment we make about the last application and this one as well. We're not making a secret determination tonight. We're simply stating that we realize that there's a generic environmental impact statement being finalized right now, which we will utilize to determine any potential impacts. So I'd like to open it up to the project to discuss this further.
Yeah, I'll introduce Gail Anderson King from White and Burke, who will take it from here for the city.
Thank you. Good evening. As you've seen, we've got the latest version of the Durkee Street plan, and this whole project was the city's revitalization effort that started back in 2004 when the Gateway building was put in. And there was always an intent to be able to do phase 2 in the future. And as a result of the DOI funding in 2014, we're now finally at that point for phase 2 to move forward. And revitalize this lot into making it more of a usable lot within the downtown and allowing for mixed-use development with making it a multi-story building, mixed-use development with becoming part of the streetscape and the character within the neighborhood. We've included with the project that you've seen tonight the DRI streetscape improvements for Durkee Street as well as for the riverfront access along the Saranac River. At this point, those projects are still in conceptual design, so they're really just more for informational purposes. We recall that this was something that you had requested, and so that's why they have been included here at this point, but they are very early in conceptual design. We're trying to work the two projects together, so it's all early. As mentioned, this is we needed the minor subdivision approval in order to then do the subdivision PUD approval and then the site plan approval that Prime will present. While the proposed 2-lot PUD will be under separate ownership, the PUD is still the overarching control of the entire project. It will still be a PUD. The open space will be along the riverfront access and the connections to the Saranac River Trail from Broad Street all the way crossing over Bridge Street and continuing down, as well as the connection, pedestrian connection from Durkee Street down to the riverfront, as you saw in the image, connecting the Arts Park and other parts of the city down to the riverfront to again have that riverfront be accessible and part of the city, which it has not been for many years. We think it's a really exciting plan, so at this point I'm going to turn it over to Aaron, who's going to talk about the PUD subdivision and some of the particulars, and then Turner and Deb from Prime will talk about the site plan.
Thank you. Aaron Ovius from Robert M. Sutherland. We were here before you in 2004 and 2005 when we did the creation of the original PUD for the ICB building. At that time, the other requirement was 5 acres, so it included the large lot that you see before you here and the lot on the south side of Broad Street. With that reduction to 3 acres, we're looking to amend the PUD such that it will basically consist of the land bound by the river, Durkee Street, Bridge, and Broad, now that highway oil has been cleaned up and merged in the city property. When the city came before you back in 2004, 2005, the goal was to redevelop this downtown corridor and went the route of the PUD because the city felt that they could they wanted the flexibility to create unique development in that corridor, and utilizing the current zoning was a little difficult in doing that. As previously mentioned, it was discussed in the ICB that would be multiple phases. Phase 1 was built, now we're moving forward with the other phases. Some unique things that we talked about, what variants are needed to create the subdivision, arguably within the PUD, those side yard setbacks and things become at the discretion of the planning board, and not really, zoning board building actually, as approved for the site plan, the PUD mapping in '05, was for a 5-story building. Only 4 was constructed. And that building was also approved to basically be a 0 lot line to the front yard along Bridge, or Broad, I'm sorry, and about 13 feet from Durkee Street. So, you know, when you look at what's coming forward, and also when you look at the proposed subdivision and the setback from the existing buildings as far as the farmer's market building, you know, none of this is out of the norm of what was looked at in '04 and '05. We're basically just a continuation of that previous project, and obviously the applicant, the city, is looking to move forward with that and having flexibility of the PUD. So, you know, I'm here representing the amendment, you know, the PUD mapping. Kind of just a small part of this. So again, the applicant, the city for the rest of it, you know, kind of go into the next piece, the site plan. But again, for the amendment to the PUD, we're going before the zoning board because the zoning board would have to grant a special use permit to amend the boundaries of that PUD. And that basically allows us to continue to develop it as we presented back in '04, just as the next phase. So this part, obviously, is pretty straightforward. Again, this is not something new that the city haven't done as far as creating PUDs. They have to often, but they have done before. They've done with single lots, they've done with multiple lots. So there's nothing unique. It's not creating any new precedences that haven't already been established within the city.
Aaron, is the parking lot under your design control?
Don't we?
Okay. No, but I'll tell you what my question is. It was presented to us that service area would be in that parking lot somewhere in the vicinity of the dumpsters. If you had, say, a restaurant or a retail store that had deliveries, they'd park in that parking lot, and then the delivery would be made to the main building. I'm just curious, whoever is making the presentation, will you discuss that?
I will.
Perfect, thank you.
Listen, man, I don't know, for ease of discussion, whether you want, you know, open up the discussion on the next item also, you know, because they are kind of all tied together, or, you know, whether you want to look at them individually, because, I mean, and the amendment to the PUD is, you know, something that was created. Really what we've done is we've taken the outside of the Broad Street lot out, and we've added the highway ordinance. So we have our minimum area, you know, we're just under 5 acres, we're 4.6, so we have the adequate area. So basically, we're, you know, just doing that amendment, creating the separate lines, separating out the ICV and the Riverwalk, allowing phase 2 to occur. So, you know, I guess, you know, again, that part's very straightforward. And obviously, you know, with that PUD, it then gives this board the flexibility to work with the applicant to create character development, you know, that doesn't strictly comply with the ordinance and bulk area plan.
I've got a question, Aaron. The, for lot 2A and 2B, parking lot and the Riverwalk, and then the building, what's going to be the mechanism for those two entities dealing with issues that are inevitably going to arise going forward?
Yeah.
How is that going to be?
Sure, so you're asking how, could you be a little more specific?
Well, jurisdiction for 2A is going to be the city.
Mhm.
Jurisdiction for the building itself, and that lot 2B is going to be prime. How is coordination between those two ownerships, if you will, going to be coordinated? I mean, if one has an issue with the other one, how are those going to be resolved? Is there something that's going to be in place? I mean, whether it's for, you know, something as simple, if there's a flood on the river and it impacts the Riverwalk, but it also impacts the parking area above, what's going to be the coordination? Who's going to be responsible? How are they going to work together to fix
Will be entered into between the city and Prime detail access points only utilities, but for the purposes of the pedestrian down the middle of the site,
Right.
that will access the Saranac Riverwalk. Also for the portions of the public parking that are in reality on, it's from the legal standpoint within that will all be governed by the easements that the city and Prime will leave. And that will spell out responsibility in terms of access and everything that we would need to.
Okay, and then this is a design question, so it's not quite related, but what's the height of the Riverwalk River at peak height
LA
during
Group has
the
been
spring?
retained by the city to develop that. We're actually teamed with like LA Group in that design. Preliminarily, right now, you're basically matching the grade of the park. Lot that you have there, so we're not looking to create elevated walk, but to create more of a streetscape and pedestrian.
Yeah, because
friendly.
now it's down below.
Well, right
is
now,
the
there's a
Riverwalk
sidewalk that goes on the backside of ICV that kind of ties into the parking lot. So the intent is obviously.
That goes
create-
behind like the farmer's market?
Yep.
Yeah, so basically continue that out north to Bridge Street. So, you know, that.
Okay, so there are a bunch of, like, it's just brush and trees there
Yeah,
now,
to
that's,
clean that up, one of the difficulties in that is obviously you have the nice site cleanup that needs to occur. That would be disturbing. a
right,
lot
and
of
so
that
we're gonna be
area.
coordinating with,
Right,
right,
that's why
yeah, I
that's a little
talked to
bit behind.
Melena about that
Right,
today.
that's why that's a little bit behind in, compared to this development, because there's some things outside the control. So a lot of them, you know, you don't want to build a Riverwalk and have to tear it out to do the
Right.
environmental cleanup, things like that. But, as Matt mentioned, you know, the reciprocal easement agreements, which we work with the city on other type projects, that, you know, tie the projects together to allow, you know, common use, walking out of the other property to maintain, things like that.
Okay.
So, you know, that will all be language prepared in the final application recording.
Okay, and what's the boardwalk gonna be constructed of?
That's still up in the air at this
Got
point.
it, okay.
I know at one point, you know, the biggest key is they're looking to create more of an overlook spot, so a spot that kind of cantilevers out, so it gets you more, you know, closer to the water. And
Right, I was just wondering, yeah, that's the picture I was thinking of, I mean, it looks, you know, it looks like brick from here, I don't know what the planners are I mean, and the city's gonna be responsible for that, so I was
Yes,
just
the
wondering what the
city
city envisions.
And the city would endeavor to use materials in the construction of the Riverwalk that would complement the materials that Prime
Oh,
is
yeah.
using for the Dairy mixed-use development.
Yeah, okay.
The transition from Broad Street to the new Riverwalk, how will that be handled?
Yeah, I know, when we represented the ICV, the concern obviously is we worked for that issue, is the staircase that originally was proposed with the ICV that lines up with the walkway. The problem is that it falls within the protection zone of the guide rails on the bridge approach, so they had to be shifted further to the west to do so. There was actually a plan submitted, 10 years ago or something to, you know, show that amendment. So obviously that will have to be coordinated in our final development plan, you know, the connection with pedestrian walkway and river walk. Because right now you gotta jump over the guide rail, so that will have to be opened up to get through.
And is the Riverwalk, going to be ADA compliant?
Yeah, I mean, it would be flush at the Bridge Street side, that would come through, and then you'd come out to Durkee. There would be a set of stairs on the Broad Street because you go up that steep bank from that parking lot and that back corner of the site. So you could actually come around or, you know, so there's routes to travel. And that's what creates that nice continuity is, you know, the Arts Park, you know,
Right.
that has a zigzaggy trail and applying, you know, straight through down to the Riverwalk, and then you come across the river, you know, head
Mhm.
yourself over to Bridge Street and continue on.
And as a side note as well, we're working on SRTG Phase 2, which will continue from Durkee Street with 2 new bridges connecting over to Pine Street and the rest of the SRTG Phase 1.
Oh,
And that will terminate right at the intersection, phase 2 of the Saranac River Trail, right at the intersection of Broad and Durkee Streets, which will allow pedestrians and bicyclists to simply cross the street onto the Riverwalk and continue down towards the city's waterfront.
and is any of that gonna take you down to, what are we calling?
Harborside?
The Harborside, yes.
Phase 3 of SRTG
That was,
is
okay,
the
you said that today,
intention.
I'm sorry, yeah, that's phase 3. Getting ahead of myself. Another question I had earlier, and I don't know if it's something you'd be talking about, Aaron, electric, charging stations. Are those going to be included in the new, okay, so we'll be,
Do you wanna save that for the site plan?
yeah, I wasn't
Okay.
sure when that was gonna be appropriate.
Okay, we can,
Okay.
we'll formally introduce
Yeah,
that.
I will.
One thing that this does, it changes the appearance of the downtown overlay parking district. Can you tell us what the current conversation is about what that will look like, how it's administered?
Sure.
Do the numbers equate to the previous?
Are you talking about parking capacity?
Yes.
Sure. A quick note on administration. For the past year now, the Plattsburgh Parking Advisory Committee has been considering the questions of parking replacement and also parking management with the prospect of this development moving forward and the city needing to address not only the replacement of the capacity of the Jerky Street lot, but also the ongoing management of the system going forward. One of the major recommendations included in the Carl Walker study, the parking study was completed by the city in 2018, was that the city does need to institute an actively managed parking system. So one of the primary recommendations that the advisory committee has made to the Common Council would be to, with the implementation of a paid system, and that will likely take the form of a mixture of permits and kiosks, with that alternative revenue source, the money that is brought in through those two avenues, the necessity of the special assessment district levy, at least in the downtown parking overlay district, will become redundant. So it's a question of whether the levy is reduced or eliminated completely, because the city's intention is to have in the future the management and the administration of the downtown parking system paid for by the users of that system rather than by the property owners who just happen to own property within the overlay district. As far as the, and one thing to keep in mind is while the levy would likely be reduced and possibly eliminated, it is possible that the city would retain the special assessment district in the legal structure, because from a standpoint of practicality, to eliminate that district altogether would at once require any future development within the former district of the SAD to provide enough off-street parking per the city code. And given the density of the downtown area, it would be very difficult for most developers or most new projects to meet that. So by keeping the legal structure in place, but by eliminating the levy, we get the best of both worlds. We maintain that flexibility downtown, but we also get the more equitable arrangement whereby the users of the parking system pay for it rather than the property owners. As to the replacement parking capacity, that was addressed in detail in the GEIS, and that will be, I'm sure, addressed in more detail in the final GEIS because we did receive a number of comments on it. But for the time being, I will just tell the board that the city over the past year has conducted a considerable number of parking counts of the downtown special assessment district. What of the parking is being used, and that was both on-street and off-street. Based on the numbers that we have seen, the city currently possesses, based on observed demand, a considerable excess of parking capacity in its special assessment district. And it becomes a question of, is the SAD, does it have excess capacity to absorb any parking deficiencies in other projects? And if it has in excess of that capacity, does it really make sense for the city to continue to build parking that it currently has no need for? Because every parking space constructed represents an opportunity lost for a new restaurant or a new single-family home or a new park for the citizens to enjoy.
That makes sense. And just as a point of clarification, the new project will provide on its site all the parking needed for its operation.
Absolutely.
The overlay parking district as it exists, the net number of parking spaces is not gonna change because other than this project, there are no significant additional parking needs in the district.
That's
Is
correct.
that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm clear on it, thank you.
Sure.
One thing that, and again, maybe this is for the next, the final thing, but the underground parking that's going to be created, I honestly have no idea, from an engineering standpoint, how that impacts land around it. I know I hate to drive through the dig in Boston, because that's all leaking. But, will that have any impact on, for instance, the Riverwalk or anything going on in that area? Will there be any noticeable impact from an underground parking garage, and what goes into supporting and maintaining an underground?
I think that's a question
That's
better
gonna be
answered
for
by
the
Turner,
next-
but that can be discussed during site
During the
plan.
next phase, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions in regard to the new lot lines for lot 2 or the deviations requested?
Is there a parking demand for the Riverwalk?
Is there what?
There's going to be 50 public spaces within that southern parking lot, and then plus more on-street parking, so potentially, yes, there may be a need for parking people using the Riverwalk. One thing I forgot to mention too, it's one of my review comments, so the applicant has seen it, but with the creation of lots 2A and 2B, there will be a parking deficiency for lot 2A associated with the gateway building of 10 spaces, I believe. So we've just asked the applicant to provide more information, just stating that the special assessment district or the new on-street parking can support that deficiency. Or maybe even some numbers from ICV stating their capacity now and how many open spaces they have on a typical day.
And we've had discussions along those lines with ICV, and their response has always been if they felt that this project was going to cause a parking problem for them, they would be the first ones to say so, and they've been made aware of it for months, and they are comfortable with it.
Do they ever fill up their lot,
No.
that garage?
Not
I
from what
mean,
we've
anytime
seen.
I've ever driven by it, it just looks empty.
Not that
I
I've
see
ever
no
seen.
cars going in or out ever.
Yeah.
I believe there was a count done a week or so ago, and I think there was like 42 open spaces on the top level of the garage.
Yeah, so that's an underused area at this point. Anyway, is that going to be available for public use?
Currently, the top floor of the parking garage is available for public use.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
I didn't even know that.
It's kind of an informal arrangement between ICB and the city. Whether ICB chooses to change that arrangement to, we don't expect that to change, at least not at this point.
Okay, good. So that is something though that is going, so that represents additional parking for the city, that upper lot.
Yes, but it's parking that currently exists, so it wouldn't be fair to count it as additional.
No, it's not,
parking.
okay, yeah, it's not additional, but I think most people in Plattsburgh have never parked there.
Yeah,
I
it's-
know I haven't.
It's certainly not something that's publicized, but
Right.
that is public parking on
Yeah,
site.
I didn't know that, okay.
That's not part of the capacity analysis, so, correct?
The ICB garage?
Right.
No. Yep.
In addition to what you're adding to the site, what's being removed was the basis of my parking question. So I think for me, you covered the issue well.
Yeah,
And we'll have more detailed information on the board with firm figures in the
Yeah.
months to come.
So are we ready to go into the next section, do you think?
Motion to accept resolutions?
Yeah, we need a motion regarding resolution 2019-11 about the sketch plan review. I think it needs to be reworded, or at least noted to be reworded. It talks about creating a new plan unit development, when you're telling me it's an amended plan unit development. Are we gonna rephrase that?
You can rephrase it right now.
I'd like to have it restated to be an amended plan unit development by whoever makes the motion.
I move, wait, change the language to amend it. Okay, yes, I move to change the language from proposed to amended for the, and I can't find the number,
2019-11.
for 2019-11. That's my front page.
It's also on the agenda as well.
Too much going on here. Do you have your agenda right there?
Meeting?
The agenda.
So we'll be accepting, what's the
Oh,
phrasing?
Accepting
Accepting.
resolution with the amendment to change the language to reflect an amended PUD, not a new PUD.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I move, yes, I,
Resolutions are new this month.
Yeah, okay. Pre-written resolutions are new this month.
yeah, and I love them, except when I couldn't find it. Okay, so a motion to approve 21911, the request to amend rather than create a planned unit development by subdividing and amending the boundaries of the existing planned unit development.
And we're accepting the sketch plan review.
And we are accepting, yes, and I move that we accept the sketch plan.
Okay. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'm sorry, just to interject here, we also need to deem this a minor subdivision.
Okay. And it's deemed a minor subdivision? Do you say those words?
And it's deemed, and it is deemed a minor subdivision.
Do I have a second?
I second that motion.
Roll call. Or further comments, anybody? Just sitting here, none?
Reg Carter,
Yes.
Loretta Rietsma,
Yes.
Marissa Gilbert,
Yes.
That's yours.
Yep.
Would you like me to read the next application?
Go right into it, as soon as I
Item
can
number
find
6.
it in the pile. Okay.
2019-10, Murphy Street mixed-use development site plan. This is a request to construct a mixed-use development consisting of 115 residential units and 10,000 square feet of parking space. Additional site improvements to include 286 parking spaces, open space and access to the Saranac River waterfront, and redevelopment of the existing farmers market building. The proposed development is located within a planned unit development, Zone C, tax map parcel number 207.20-7-15. Owner, City of Plattsburgh, applicant Prime Plattsburgh LLC, engineers McFarland Johnson. Again, this is a sketch plan review. So again, just to reiterate, this is the associated site plan with the PUD subdivision that we just discussed. As background, we all know the city was awarded a $10 million DRI grant back in 2016, so now we're moving forward with the associated projects, and this is one of them. As stated in the initial sketch review of the proposed mixed-use development at 22 Durkee Street, this is within the proposed amended PUD. Again, 215 residential units, 10,000 square feet of commercial space. On the first floor, associated surface parking, underground parking underneath the footprint of the building, and redevelopment of the former Plattsburgh Farmers and Crafters Market. So the 10,000 square feet of commercial space is here along Durkee Street on the first floor with residences on the first floor along the Riverwalk and Bridge Street, and then on the 4 upper floors. The units will be a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms with 52 1-bedrooms, 59 2-bedrooms, or 3 bedrooms. There will be some interior office space and on-site amenities, including a gym. In addition, a public walkway has been incorporated into the plan that will connect the proposed Arts Park to the proposed Riverwalk that will serve as the public outdoor space and Saranac River Trail Greenway connection. On-site parking being provided is 286 spaces. Our zoning code actually requires 319 parking spaces. So there will be a deficiency of 33 spaces. The project is planning on providing a narrative supporting the lower number of parking spaces based on comparable development. Even though the deficiency will be identified through that narrative, the parking table does need some clarification in regards to on-site commercial spaces. They're identifying they're providing 113, and there's only 86 parking spaces in the southern lot, so we just need some additional information in regards to the rest of the spots. I have spoke with the applicant, and they let me know that some of the parking for the commercial space will be in the interior courtyard, but they'll expand on that when they speak to you. 50 of the spaces in the southern parking lot are open to the public. They are using those 50 spaces in calculation for the commercial space, but that's allowed in the special assessment district, and obviously, you can't regulate who's using those spaces because they are parking or public parking and will not be regulated. The city, in addition, has developed a parking plan to replace the loss of public parking in Durkee Street that addresses the current capacity needs of the city. As Matt mentioned, there was a study completed by Carl Walker back in 2017, which identified that the city was at about 65% capacity on street parking and 85% off-street. We have recommended that the project work with the building inspector's office just to ensure that the parking needs for the project are being met. Again, this project is still at sketch, so we're missing a lot of details. We've asked them to provide a utility plan, a landscaping plan, a lumens plan, a draft parking agreement, draft utility easements. Obviously, we'll need dimensions for all of the buildings and associated parking. We've requested a typical floor plan for not only the first floor of the commercial space, but all of the subsequent floors above. I do have a floor plan in here for the underground parking. I know you're asking about that. So it will just be one level underneath the footprint of the building. The project is also recommended to provide additional details in regards to architecture and materials provided or proposed. As you heard, the architect is here tonight to present that. The project, as defined in the DGEIS, has received SHPO approval, just as a side note. Other side little comments, we've asked for additional details in regards to daily residential operations such as laundry, mail, on-site storage. Will there be bike racks provided, electrical charging stations, etc. Another note is if Durkee Street is reconfigured as a one-way with angled parking, some of the public spaces will be within the footprint of the new lot, which Matt mentioned will be an easement that we'll need from them as well. Other little things like a truck turning plan, emergency access, identifying that with our local fire and police. I did speak with the city's fire chief, and he stated that even the smallest fire truck will not be able to access the courtyard or the underground parking, and he recommended access via the back side of the building along the river, and using that river walk to basically get behind the building for fire access. So there'll just have to be coordination with the project engineer, because obviously we don't want other cars accessing that, other motorized vehicles, but at the same time.
Having a leg cramp.
Oh, go ahead. At the same time, we need to allow emergency access.
Stand up, maybe we ought to have a 5-minute break, because I'm gonna scream any second. Okay.
Just do some circles. So yeah, we've just asked that they coordinate more closely with our emergency services. I included the renderings in this slideshow as well for further discussion. And I know the architect has a separate PowerPoint, but I don't know if the project wants to start off with a presentation first, or if the board wants to ask questions and have them respond. It's up to you guys how you want to handle that.
I think we should wait for Marissa to
Sure,
be
we
back.
can do that.
That way
We can absolutely do that.
she won't be able to vote on it unless she. So, I'm gonna make a motion, take a 5-minute break.
There you go. We're waiting for you.
Charlie horse.
Uh-oh.
My leg.
So Marissa, would you like the applicants to do a formal presentation, or would you like to ask questions and they'll respond?
I think we need to have some introduction. Many of the things we were concerned about when we looked at the GEIS was we talked about Durkee Street switching to one-way and its impact, and what the building looks like and how that actually connects to what buildings look like downtown. There were some certain explanations we were looking
So
for,
do we
and
want them to do their presentation?
I think they
and
should
then-
do
yeah.
their presentation, and then we're gonna
Okay.
dig into those issues, because we had those questions. And if I stand up and sit down and stand up, so just ignore me, okay?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Charles Gottlieb from Whiteman, Osterman, and Hanna in Albany, New York. My role this evening is brief. I am Land Use and Zoning Counsel for Prime Plattsburgh. Here this evening with Turner Bradford from McFarland Johnson, Project Engineer, Stephen McKenzie, Project Architect, and Deb Osterhout from Prime Plattsburgh. As you all know, this is a mixed-use development that was the result of an RFP that was from a grant from the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. And we submit the project will improve the walkability of the downtown, aesthetically improve the look of the downtown, and facilitate a walkable waterfront, which will certainly beautify this area of the city. Our application and our role throughout this process is solely for the Prime Plattsburgh site plan application. That being said, all the other applications that you've heard this evening, the minor subdivision, the PUD subdivision application, and also the city's ZBA applications for special use permits are needed, and our application is contingent on those being approved, as they set forth the PUD boundaries and they set forth the area and bulk regulations by which our site plan will comply with. You also heard this evening that there is a generic environmental impact statement that is ongoing. The comment session for the DGEIS, the draft generic impact statement, I believe ended today. The city will go through a process of responding to all comments in a final GEIS, and then after that there will be a findings statement. We have been working closely as a party to that process to ensure that all environmental impacts have been assessed in that process. We are only one of the few projects that are assessed in that secret process, but we have been closely involved, and we will demonstrate that the environmental impacts, the potential environmental impacts, have been assessed throughout that process. We will also submit for the January meeting a site plan narrative that will walk the board through all the site plan review criteria that you're required to review as a part of the application, and we'll submit how we meet each of those criteria to the satisfaction of those criteria, which of course will likely result in some additional comments. We will also try in written fashion to respond to all your comments this evening. To the extent we will kind of do a 40,000-foot view this evening and dive into the details in writing for our January submission. One thing I would request, all these applications do require a public hearing. The minor subdivision, the PUD subdivision, and our site plan. It's always my practice to try to get public comment in as quick as possible. So if the board does deem it necessary, we will respond to all comments for the January meeting. And we would think it's appropriate to then have a public hearing at the January meeting, which then can be extended as needed. But that is one request I wanted to put before the board. Is a quicker way to get public involvement. With that being said, I will hand it over to Turner to answer some of your engineering and site plan questions, because I too cannot answer any engineering questions.
Turner, Bradford, McFarland, Johnson. I'm gonna get rid of most of that. So Milana did an excellent job. In fact, I have nothing to say. This probably looks a lot like, I think we were here maybe in August. So I will just quickly go through what we're looking at and then highlight maybe the 4 or 5 major changes we made. So the red outline of the building on the north side of the site plan right is 39,000 square feet. I think Milana mentioned 65 feet tall, 5 stories, 115 residential units with the breakout of 52 one-bedroom, 59 two-bedroom, and 4 3-bedroom units. Parking underneath structure, but also under the courtyard as well. The 1,000 square feet of mixed use will be along Durkee, as Milana mentioned. And then the other building on the plan left, on the southeast of the site, is the existing farmer's market building that will be renovated and rehabbed. The split there is essentially the same as the existing building, with the indoor space being renovated as mixed use, and the outdoor space being dedicated as civic space. We're imagining it recreating a bit what it is now, an open air pavilion that would get integrated into the walkway. So one correction is that the project is proposing 13,400 total square feet of mixed use space. So that's between both spaces, 10,000 in the larger building and 3,400 in the renovated building. Parking, 286 parking spaces, 165 in the garage, 35 in the courtyard, 86 in the open lot. The deviation from code that we were requesting is that for the residential units, that it's 1.5 parking spaces per residential unit instead of, the way code calculates it is 20 for the first 10 and then
.175, something, I think.
Point one seven?
I don't
Yeah,
remember.
whatever it was. We are more than comfortable justifying the 1.5 per unit, based upon other projects in similar places that Prime has done. And that would bring the site's demand to the 286 that we are providing. So of the 286, 50 in the 86 space surface lot will be made available for public use to come and go. Of the 13,400 square feet of mixed use space, we are proposing currently 6,150 square feet of restaurant space, 7,250 square feet of commercial or retail space. And so that number is basically what we've done is we backed into the largest allowable restaurant space for the number of parking spaces we had, right? Because that's the highest use demand for parking. So if we split that 13,400 square feet of non-residential space, we split that somehow between commercial retail and restaurant, what's the highest use to get to that 286? So that's essentially what we're proposing is the worst case scenario for the parking demand of the site. Right now, there are no tenants identified, but that is essentially what would be allowable with the requested change of the 1.5 per residential unit. I think the only other changes from what was presented in August are the stairs and the ramp on the south side of the building. This is due to the grade drop that drops down Durkee, so that the walkway along the face of the building is going to remain at the first floor. So there's ADA access from the walkway. Yes, there is. And stairs to come up. I believe previously there were islands in the parking area. We actually removed that space and provided to widen the green space of the walkway. And then we added what was future development. We made that the renovation of the farmer's market. Speak to the loading space that is identified on the top of the lot there. We kicked this around. We've had debates about where to put it. That's where we came up with as the I guess the least worst alternative. I think our thought is that it provides good access to the larger space. What are are your thoughts?
If that handicap parking space is occupied by a
Right.
vehicle,
Yeah.
how is that
Yeah.
service area?
So we have
accessed?
run truck turning templates, both on the dumpster and on the loading space, with a car parked there.
Okay.
Yeah, and we will provide those for the site for sure.
I've got a question, that loading area, will that be for, materials that are needed, in the building itself and for any restaurant or retail entities? And,
The materials needed in the
what-
building.
yeah, I mean, you've got a loading area, what specifically, is-
Deliveries.
Yeah, it would be anything
Yeah.
delivered to either building for use, but, so, yes.
Yeah,
once-
so
once
it'd be
the building's
deliveries,
up
I
and
mean, if there's a restaurant in there,
Yep.
it'd be
Yeah.
deliveries for a
Yep.
restaurant.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, those areas, I mean, you're right, there's no good solution here, because we're talking about, you're gonna be hauling everything right across
Yeah.
what's supposed to be this beautiful
Park space.
park space.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be, that's going to be where, it's not gonna be a beautiful park space anymore, it's going to be, especially, I mean, it's just the reality, winter's
Yeah.
long here and spring is muddy and, it's no longer, it is what it is, but
Right.
I think we have to be
There-
realistic
No, I mean,
about
look, it's
about
not
what
our
that's gonna
goal.
look like going forward.
Absolutely, and it's not our goal to have that be an eyesore either.
And that's
We do
right
take
there
a
on
long,
the
long
street
time.
when you're going, I mean, and that's gonna be visible from, that park area that we're
Yeah.
creating across the street that's coming down the Arts Park, the
There's
water
also
park.
been discussion, when looking at the redesign of Durkee Street as a one-way, of putting up signage designating loading and unloading zones in like 3 or 4 spaces from 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock every day. So that's, you can't park there because it's a loading unloading zone on street. So
And that, could
potentially
that
that could be a
actually be,
solution.
could that actually be closer to where the entrance is?
It would probably be on
going-
the other side of the street because of the angled parking on the east side.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's something that we're trying to preserve
Sure.
as,
Yeah.
the jewel of what
Yeah.
we're creating here.
So.
But, that's gonna be tough to do regardless, and if it's now going to be the loading area,
Right, so the intent is an attempt to screen. There already is the electrical transformer that is sort of right above it, that can't go anywhere. We were actually more trying to protect the connection of the two at the river, and the civic space that's gonna be down there. So we prioritize that over the corner at the street. It will be hardscaped, so there will be a sidewalk, so I don't, mud, but it's gonna be snowy but the intent is to screen it to the extent possible. And the other thing I think is the timing of deliveries.
right,
The owners and operators of businesses don't desire deliveries, when times are busy. But, that can be worked out with tenants as they arise. The other question you
yeah, cause
had-
basically, I mean, here's the picture we have, we're talking about, this is a beautiful picture of the way down to the river, but this is where all the deliveries are gonna be made, it's all gonna be going back and forth right here. We're talking about right here. So that's no longer this beautiful walkway down with lovely plantings and stuff, it's a delivery zone, and the realities that go with a delivery zone, I mean,
Yeah.
the boxes and the stuff, I'm just,
Right.
again, I'm just trying to be realistic here about
Sure. I mean,
what we're
it's-
doing to this, what we're trying to create here, and we're trying to make that, something of a jewel, and yet, right off the bat, we're gonna use the jewel, part of the jewel for some pretty significant trucks and deliveries and.
Will tenants be identified prior to final approval?
I don't know, we'll be working to get tenants in as soon as we can, but I can't guarantee
so we can identify how many, you know, average deliveries take place every week for the businesses and, you know, limit that, those hours of delivery.
I'm just trying to bring it up as a reality, if that's gonna be the spot we do it at, and is there, I don't see a good answer.
On street.
It has to be done, but.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the goals here is to provide everything on the site that we can, but, we can certainly, we can plan with the city and look at options. The other question you had was about the underground parking and its
Right.
effect maybe on the.
Yeah, what are the
walkway.
dimensions of the underground parking?
Yeah, so it's essentially the footprint of the building.
Okay.
And the, walkway, or in the courtyard underneath. So you'll enter off of Bridge Street at the bottom of Bridge Street, which will basically be at grade. By the time you get down there, you're almost flat with the walkway. And in fact, we're gonna have two doors out at either side that will be at grade. So that is an exposed back of the building. The goal is to, you know, is to landscape that with a hedge or something to cover it up. But that will be, and actually that's something that, I think we're working on for the next meeting is a rendering of the backside of the building. Because the parking garage in the middle section there will, be open air. So
Right.
there'll be a half wall but part of it will be open just to ventilate. So the goal is going to be to landscape along that wall to block some of it. I think.
Why would deliveries not be just made in the courtyard, right in the middle there?
So I think a couple reasons is access into that space, and, the entrance to the back of house. I think, actually Steve might be able to answer this better, but my understanding is both the front and the back of the building might be storefront. Whereas the set of double doors, the one farther down, is the entrance to the back of house. So that deliveries are actually made on the south face of the building. Did I get that, Steve?
Yeah, I'll add a few things later.
Perfect.
Although that still has to go upstairs there, if you do it that way.
And so there is a ramp there, next to that.
It's just not in the,
It's
am I not, I'm not seeing, you're saying there's a ramp here?
It might not have made it into the rendering, or it might be blocked by that tree, but on the screen here, so beneath the stairs is a ramp coming up, which also provides the ADA access from the lower level.
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw it out there for the record that, you know, doing this off of Bridge Street or doing it in the, going down back, it's not gonna be what we all are watching. Cause this is what we're gonna see, we're not gonna see, you know, down on Bridge Street where the entrance is to either go down into the garage or down in the courtyard. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay.
Can you provide dimensions of the underground parking? One of the things that I'm looking at when I see that sketch is you didn't allocate space for the foundation of the building. It appears that the parking space goes right to the outside building line, which is in the same location as the structure above it.
Yeah, I do believe we used the inside face of wall, and it just didn't translate right, but we can check that.
But dimensionally, you're not sacrificing any,
I'm not concerned, in fact.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see them, but there are little dots in there
yeah,
that are a first swing at a column layout, and the parking, in some sense is laid out to match match those column spaces. And so there's more room than what is actually needed. So even if things had to,
So the aisle widths, you calculated those at 24 feet, like the upper level,
correct,
9 by 18 dimension.
correct.
And tell us about the exit. It looks kind of congested for 2 vehicles.
I believe it's 24 feet wide. It's gonna be access controlled. But we can double check on all the widths of that. I mean, right now, it's just laid out at 24 feet wide.
From the end of each of those parking spaces adjacent to the exit.
Oh, I think it's a lot wider than that. But I agree, there's some cleanup that needs to happen in there
Okay.
for the entrance exit. I think off of Bridge, it's a couple of feet that it needs to drop to get to the floor there, so it's probably a ramp down. But all that will get fine tuned as the building gets a little more finite and real. Those were the detailed things I wanted to bring up for the site plan, and I'm certainly available, but I'd like to turn it over to Steve McKenzie, the architect, who I think can talk through some of the other stuff you guys have been hearing
I
about.
would just have one other question.
Yeah, please.
Regarding, will you be working with municipal lighting to mask these transformers?
Yeah, that's
Or
another.
what's your vision?
I've heard a lot of things. The latest one I've seen is actually doing, actually sort of putting them inside a large planter, with like sort of like almost a sea of grass around it. Yes, the desire is to somehow make that presentable. Obviously, it's the front of the building. They want it to look right, and they're not going anywhere. So, there are requirements they have for access. But yes, that is something we'll bring next time, is a more detailed landscape plan and how some of that actually is done.
This may be a little more technical, but how are these transformers supplied by power, and what's the distribution direction from them?
I'm going off.
And we wish directed how that for you.
Okay.
It comes this way, right?
It goes
straight down
everywhere.
Derby Street.
It goes up and down 4 corners.
Okay. More in the road or under the sidewalk or?
It goes under the sidewalk where we did Durkee back in '95, something like that, so it runs parallel Durkee under the east side as a pavement. There are lines that go out of the transformers up the alleyway and actually go up towards Protection Avenue. All the transformers on Protection Avenue are actually fed from that switch gear, so we
Oh.
trucks out there recently, those feeds also, so. It's out in the roadway, but it does go all 4 directions of Broad, Durkee, City Hall, and I don't know what that little short taxi stop is called.
Not many options.
No, that was but if, I will be here obviously to answer anything, but I'll turn it over to Steve now, if you're ready, Steve.
That's a good question. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about architecture. I think sometimes we get the opportunity not to talk to the public about rationale behind how a building's designed or really what drives architecture. Apologize, I'm not in the best of health tonight, so I may have to sit for part of this.
Steve, we have a remote you can use to advance
You
your
do?
PowerPoint if you would like it.
Okay, you have to be a college graduate to
You
use
do
that?
not, there's arrows on either side of that center
May still
circle.
be a challenge for me, so we'll see. I thought it'd be good to, do you mind if I sit in the corner here? Is that all right?
Oh, God, no. want the chair?
No, I think that'd be inappropriate. Thanks. I think sometimes it's useful to look at maybe a larger perspective on this when you're in the middle of analyzing this kind of effort on the part of the city. And I must commend you for what you're trying to do here. So I do think a 10,000 foot or 40,000 foot point of view is important to keep in mind what you're trying to do here. Let's see. So I wanted to offer a little bit of an overview in architectural terms. You do have to be a college graduate to use this. Sorry about that. It's not working. There we go. So quickly, this is straight out of the National Historic Preservation Office guidelines in terms of how to handle projects in historic settings. So they do talk about the fact that they encourage new construction in historic settings. They don't intend that you copy or replicate what's there, but you be sympathetic in terms of the character of the neighborhood. So I highlighted the key words here in terms of what that means. This is actually language similar to a project we're doing now down in Kingston, New York, which is a major redevelopment by the Stockade District. So it's important to keep that perspective in mind, though, in terms of the mindset for how you approach a project like this, okay? So that really is a key driver for how we approach this, if you're looking at this from the historic point of view. And then in terms of design philosophy, many aspects that go into how we approach a project. Much of the way we approach anything is designing from the outside in as well as the inside out. And when I say from the outside in, there are internal drivers, whether they're constraints or an owner's program, budget, whatever, that shape how a project is designed. When I talk about the outside in, obviously it's things like zoning, meeting with folks like you, context, climate, etc. So very much the way the design process works is a balancing act, if you will, of all these different factors and different constraints. And I do like constraints. What I don't like is discovering constraints late in the process, because that disrupts really an orderly process or an orderly kind of dialogue in terms of how you arrive at the appropriate outcome. So to me, constraints are healthy. I don't care how many they are, what they are, but I actually do like them, because that's really part of what shapes the ultimate process. Someone once said the hardest design problem is a blank sheet of paper with no constraints. I think that's true. Because where do you start? So I think you're obviously aware of some of that. We have the owner's constraints, again, in terms of budget, obviously, and market, et cetera. So you have to be the sort of person who sort of enjoys organized chaos sometimes to be an architect, if you will. I've been doing this for 50 years, so that's why I look like you, Rick. No hair, which is okay. And feel free to ask questions as we go through this. So I want to touch a bit on, obviously, what's one of the key factors here. I've always felt for a long time now that the car has been rather destructive for us in terms of the built environment. I think we're starting to see some of the response to that in terms of quality of life, in terms of quality of built environment, sustainability, climate change, etc. So I'm very happy again to see that you're embracing that, whether it's intuitively or consciously, that change is necessary in terms of how the automobile is accommodated. So this happens to be an Italian hill town. I brought a little book here, that's one of my favorites. It's called Timeless Cities, but no surprise, most of them are Italian hill towns. And excellent book to read if you want to learn about good concepts for the built environment. But what's interesting is that in most every case, the timeless cities are built for people. They're built for pedestrians. They're built for the pedestrian experience. They're built for a pedestrian scale in terms of what you encounter as you move through the built environment. Buildings tell stories. In the days that obviously predate the printing press, in fact, this is another reason why people like some of the timeless Italian cities. The buildings were ways to remember stories, whether it's from the Bible or other kinds of components. So I'm not as intimately acquainted with the stories there are to tell about Plattsburgh. I'm sure you have some, but I think it's also important not to lose sight of that aspect of what the built environment is really for and how it shapes your experience. But the bottom line is, I think we need to get back to that kind of mindset, and it's great to see that you're embracing that in terms of hopefully rethinking the role of the automobile, or at least taking a step forward. This happens to be where I live across the lake in Burlington. I have an office on Battery Street, right by the waterfront, so I live above where I work. And about 12 years ago, my wife and I sold our house in Shelburne, downsized. We have 2 kids, but you know, again, we don't need a big house. And I have to tell you, it's been fabulous as a lifestyle change to live in a 700 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment, and I walk downstairs to get to work. We have 1 car. I've had an electric bike. Everything's within a walkable circumstance. And again, that's exactly what I see this project doing for downtown Plattsburgh as a catalyst, and it's an excellent first step. So to me, this is fantastic, and I hope the city as a whole will recognize that and support it for what you're trying to do, because I think it's essential, and I can testify to that. The other side is actually a place I have over in Italy, where it's the same kind of circumstance. Very simple, modest accommodations. It's in a part of Italy that not as well known, but it's a hill town, 3,000 people, same circumstance, walkable. And the analogy here is, again, the ability to develop a sense of community. And I think that's the other essential component of what this project can do for downtown Plattsburgh, which is facilitate connections among people, besides the support for the business components downtown. And you talk a lot about the impact of the internet these days. We're all aware of maybe what that can do in terms of communication, but it's very damaging in terms of building community. You're not really connecting with people. So I think physically living in a circumstance that enables encounters on a casual or, let's say, planned basis is, again, an essential step if we're going to have a proper built environment. And I'm speaking from experience. When you go to the town square in this little hill town in Italy, you see all the older men there. That's their version of the internet, is people talking to each other, catching up on whatever's going on in town. And it's great to see. You've got that opportunity here, and I'd love to see that happen as this project takes shape. So these are kind of some personal experiences that very much inform how we approach architecture and design. And to me, architecture isn't simply about the building. It's not just bricks and mortar. It's much more organic. It's really what architecture can do in terms of improving quality of life and making a difference in addressing all these things. In terms of specific goals for this project, I think it goes without saying that restoring the street edges along Durkee Bridge, I think, is valuable besides the pedestrian walkway. I don't know how long the parking lot's been there, and I honestly don't recall what was there before, but I think that's a missing component, again, of building a proper circumstance for a built environment that in turn informs all the things I'm talking about, creates these opportunities. Going back to the historic comments, when I say respect Durkee and Bridge Streets, those are particular design tools that we use to knit together the new and the existing or historic parts of the building. So whether to scale the project, to building character, whatever materials, color, fenestration, that's part of our design vocabulary to achieve whatever we feel is the appropriate outcome. Enhancing the viability commercially goes without saying. I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Loretta.
Pardon?
Loretta.
Loretta. I think back to your comment about the delivery specifically, you're familiar with Church Street, downtown Burlington, same circumstance. Everything's scheduled there. When you walk in Church Street, you're not aware of the fact that deliveries, trash, everything comes in and out of stores, but it's scheduled for early morning. This will be no different. And frankly, this is a much easier circumstance for how to deal with that. So I recognize that it's a very good question. It's a legitimate concern, but it's manageable. And it's being managed successfully in very similar kinds of settings. I see it every day because I walk down the Church Street with the dog pretty much every day, twice a day. And if it's something he wants to find, he'll find it. So it's manageable. So I I'm not concerned about the ability to manage it. I think without question, we can maintain the aesthetics that everyone feels is so important for the Riverwalk. So, obviously that's the existing site. It's a picture I found off the internet that shows you the Durkee Street side of the site. That's the current context. And I think everyone talked a lot about the site plan already. My sense is that maybe you haven't quite fully internalized what's happening on the site. So very quickly, this is a building that's tucked into a sloping site. The high points on the corner of Bridge and Durkee Streets, which is where we have an accessible entry. The site slopes significantly away from that corner along Bridge Street, so you're down about another 8 feet. And likewise, as you move along Durkee Street, where we show these stairs on the southwest corner, is down about another 7 or 8 feet. So, in terms of the parking, that's actually being buried into the slope and concealed by the building that's on top of it. So you're not really going to be aware of the underground parking as far as that's concerned. The ramp that Turner described on the south side, Loretta, is actually integrated into this side and this side here. It's intentionally concealed, and that's both an accessible ramp for residents to enter the building as well as for perhaps moving in, as well as perhaps for service purposes for commercial. So aesthetically, we intentionally concealed that within the building envelope.
So where,
So it'd be behind, see these ramp access right here, so there's columns that come down here, so it's really behind this column here and the landscape.
so how would you get onto the ramp?
So you walk across here, you make a right turn, on the ramp.
Yeah, but that's steps.
No, it's next to the steps right here. So there'd be an access here to a ramp that comes up behind the wall, makes a U-turn up to the landing, which is the same elevation as the top of the steps. Okay, I can show you. more
Yeah, no,
detail
that's
later
okay.
if you like. So that addresses both accessibility as well as the practical need for deliveries inside the building, and it addresses the aesthetics, so that the ramp is not staring you right in the face when you come by that part of the site. The emphasis will be on the landscaping and on the Riverwalk for that part of the site. So, and one point of clarification, by the way, from a code standpoint, this is a 4-story building with a mezzanine and a basement. And Rick, from a code enforcement standpoint, that makes a difference in the type of building and how we design and define the type of construction. So I know from a perception standpoint, it looks like a 5-story building, but again, the mezzanine from a code standpoint doesn't count as a floor. There are constraints in how we can design that. So I can talk about that more later if you so desire, but officially it's 4 stories, classification as a building code. Okay? That's separate from that. So when I think about then, apart from, let's say, accommodated program, we talked a lot about the building program in terms of number of units, parking, et cetera. But the other aspect of the program is how does it integrate with this part of the city? So I think, again, back to the pedestrian part of it, we have the covered walkway along Durkee, where you see same elevation as the commercial spaces, the ability to access those commercial spaces under protection, under weather protection, because it does snow here, it does get messy in the winter, obviously. That's also a practical fact of life with the grade, because outside of that and separate from that level covered walkway is where the sidewalk will descend as the street descends and as the angle parking descends on that side of Durkee Street, okay? So when you get to the entry point, under the building to the interior courtyard, you're still gonna be a couple feet below the finished floor for level 1, as we call it, but we can finesse that in terms of how we ramp that. Keep all of that wheelchair accessible. And just so you know, that can be a secondary sort of access if it's appropriate as far as deliveries or things that serve the commercial spaces, okay? So that is a fallback, apart from whatever's done from a scheduling standpoint, all right? So the corner entry on Durkee and Bridge is actually the housing entry, primary housing entry for the units above. The other southwest corner, I think of more as the commercial entry, serving that covered walkway area that connects the corners. There's a secondary entry where you see that recess just below the corner entry. That's a secondary entry for the housing as well. because level one, the commercial space divides that in two, so we want the ability for somebody who may live on that south wing of the building to access that without having to go up an elevator and down to get to it. So there's a convenience standpoint in terms of how that functions internally. Okay? And then otherwise, in terms of the interior courtyard, we talked about the parking, how that may or may not be used as a component to support some of the commercial spaces. There's an amenity deck on the east side of that, which is the same elevation as the parking. And that's gonna be amenities primarily for the residents, whether it's for outdoor events or a lounge type area, a place to admire the view, et cetera. That's one level higher than the Riverwalk, because remember, the building is tucked into the side of the hill, okay? So the treatment we're using on the edge of that amenity deck, as well as on the ends of the building, basically is what I'll call a green wall. We want that to look like a landscape exterior. We intend to use something like river birch for the base on the tree to screen the parking, where that makes sense. Where we can, on the south side of the building, and this is gonna require more time and more study, where the Riverwalk connects, I'd like to see something a bit more serpentine. Classic approach that Olmsted used, I'm sure you spent time in Central Park, is everything curves into serpentine because it's a much more interesting experience to move through a space and move through a park. So there's that sense of discovery as you move around the curve and see whatever's coming up ahead. So we have the ability to do that here, we just haven't had time to refine it in terms of how that sets up. But the other reason I want to do that is to move it away from the south side of the building, so we have a proper amount of space to create a landscaped edge. If you've ever been to Scotland, and I love, I'm Scottish obviously, but one of the things I love about the architecture there is the buildings take a background presence. The landscape takes the foreground. So when you go there, you're not seeing buildings shouting for attention. There's too much of that over here, I think. Your buildings are competing for attention when they shouldn't be. And so very much in this case, I'd love to see landscaping take a stronger presence in terms of the overall aesthetic impact. So that's part of our goal. It's tricky because of the grading, tricky because of the tightness of the site, but we have ways we can do that, even if it's literally a vertical green wall, if you will, that we put at the edge of the parking structure. Some of that's still being sorted out with the Riverwalk design, as has already been mentioned, so we're trying to blend that in a manner that works best for how that all fits together. Okay? So I talked about pedestrian scale, the fact that we have a covered walkway, the fact that we have landscaping. When you get along the north wing of the building along Bridge, that'll be elevated so that it's appropriate to have housing units facing north. Not appropriate to have housing units that are at sidewalk level because you don't want strangers walking by, looking in your front window. That's just not comfortable. So it's a good circumstance in terms of how that sets up, both on the north side of the building and on the south side of the building. Can you go to we don't have the basement plan here, but Rick, you were asking about parking structure is based on, again, the standard 9 by 18 stalls, 24-foot driveway. We made allowances schematically for wall thicknesses for construction, so we have plenty of buffer space there in terms of how that's concerned, so not a concern.
Without dimension, it's hard to evaluate.
Yeah,
that,
it's
so-
a schematic, it's single line
Yeah.
drawing, so it hasn't been developed to that point yet, but
Yeah.
conceptually, that's built into the model for what it takes to make that work. And there are many different ways to handle that in terms of types of structural systems, but we do have several in mind that, back to the budget, we know will fit the owner's budget for how that works, as well as the code requirements. So I thought it was worthwhile just sort of, again, walking you through conceptually how the building's put together, because it's really important to understand the underpinnings for how that takes shape and how that drives the form of the building. In terms of context, this is something that Deb actually put together on the right. You can see a couple buildings that we reference downtown to the extent we think that's appropriate, whether it's a cornice detail or whether it's a co-op building. The fact that you have, again, punch openings, I notice a lot of brick with heavy cornice treatment. But it's also the case, I think, that buildings should reflect their times. So we're taken seriously when I say the National Historic Office says, do something that's sympathetic, but we don't want to build a theme park. We're not trying to reproduce old buildings, that's not appropriate in this case, but we do want to be sympathetic. So these are things that we have referenced both in terms of whether it's cornice, punch openings, scale of the buildings. These are things that we picked up on, particularly for how the building sets up. The way we've organized in the volume, because it is a big U-shaped building, is we really divided it into 5 components. You have the 2 corner elements, which we feel deserve greater prominence, both in terms of finishes as well as general impact. And then secondary to that, we have the legs, which are along Bridge Street and along Riverwalk, as well as the middle portion along Durkee Street. And then the other thing we've done is that we step back the building on what you call level 5, which is really the mezzanine level back, and those 3 secondary segments to reduce the visual impact of the volume. And that's manipulating volume again to create something that's an appropriate fit for the scale. So when you walk along the street, you're going to have the sense of more of a 4-story building. In other words, not the sense of 5-story, depending on your vantage point. And then we use stone at the base. That'll be the case all the way around. I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Deb, you've talked about some of this already in terms of materials.
We have all the way around
Okay.
Bridge, Durkee, and then down the Riverwalk.
Okay.
Down the pedestrian walk.
With, I'm thinking of a red stone type material for the corner buildings, more traditional type material for greater emphasis there, as well as some metal panel. And again, we're still studying different materials because we have to be sensitive to the budget constraints, but we're trying to balance that with something that we think aesthetically really appropriate. Didn't want to do a building that was too dark. I think keeping the materials light keeps the impact of the building light rather than using dark colors too much, so we felt that was important. Likewise, downtown, you don't have buildings that have balconies that are expressed, so we purposely treat the balconies as simply larger punch openings, so that you have the sense of a facade, not something that's overly busy, because I didn't want this to get really too complex in terms of a lot of different things going on. So it's that balancing act of having 3 identifiable, let's call it buildings, that are sympathetic to the scale of the rest of the downtown, but yet there's a certain unity in how that fits together. I think that's really important, to have that sense of coherence for how this fits together. So the unity is a function of the material palette, fenestration, scale, color, etc., for how that all works. You can see the expression on the right-hand side, the rendering of covered walkway, so that we're appropriate. We have something that accommodates pedestrians in a manner that's comfortable. This kind of restates what I just said, actually, in terms of strategy, so be happy to share this leaflet if you want to study this in more detail, but that's really summarizing a lot of the things I just said in terms of our design kit, palette of tools, if you will. And that's again the rendering you're all familiar with in terms of corner of Bridge and Durkee. Great opportunities in terms of views when you get to the top floors of this building. That's why we have some balconies for all the units. I think access to daylight, fresh air is essential from both a physical and mental health standpoint. So every unit's going to have a balcony. And some will have really nice views towards the lake. You can actually see north towards Lake Champlain on the Bridge Street side of the building, and certainly looking east from some of the upper floors. So there's studies that show that, as I said, access to daylight and fresh air really do make a difference in terms of people's physical health. And the farther you get north, I think, the more important that sort of thing becomes, really, when we see it in the wintertime. This is what the shortest day of the year now. Alcohol only does so much. So you have to do what you can. So, but I'm really a big believer in that component. We got some feedback, I think it was from Matt and others, that we felt something emphasizing the corners as a significant design statement was important. I think corners are sometimes overlooked as design opportunities, so we're trying to respect the fact that this really has that dual orientation, the Bridge and Durkee, same for Durkee and Riverwalk. fits right into the fact that there's a certain duality in terms of a pedestrian component and a commercial component to how this building sets up. So that's some of the thinking behind the corner aesthetic, for how this sets up. I talked earlier about old and new blend. This is actually a building in downtown Burlington. Some of you may be familiar with it, but that's a very nice old historic brick building converted to condos. It added a penthouse on the top floor, which is obviously a very contemporary addition, but it's a good example of how a blend in old and new could really work well. And that's really what I envision for this building is, in terms of the building itself, a blend of old and new design tools, but likewise in terms of how it fits in with the rest of the downtown, likewise, doing something very similar to this. You actually already had shown a lot of what I was going to talk about anyway, so I think we've already covered this pretty well. I think it's great that the farmer's market building is going to get some reuse. I think that's got great potential to kind of expand on what this whole circumstance could be as a really good addition for the downtown. And again, that's going back to our service entry, Loretta. Really how attractive that will be. It's something you'll have to manage, but done all the time. I see it every day on Church Street, November. And frankly, this is a place I would love to live, because to me, it's got all the elements I think are really valuable and important for quality of life. Whether it's a little work circumstance or simply living in a downtown setting where you can walk to get to whatever you need. That's something we've discovered living in Burlington on Battery Street. It's a revelation for my wife. And as I said, we drive the car maybe one day a week. We walk to the co-op downtown, August 1st around the block. I bought her a new bike, a recumbent. She has a terrible sense of balance. She's hearing impaired, so she has difficulty on the bike. But I finally just had to buy her a recumbent because she didn't want to feel like an old lady. But since I bought it in August, she's been out almost every day on the bike path riding. She absolutely loves it. So the exercise for her is great. And the fact that we live where we live allows us to take advantage of that kind of opportunity. That's what I'm saying. If you don't ever get in the car and drive, it makes a huge difference in terms of quality of life and what I call sustainable lifestyle. And I think that's something we all have to think about more carefully and get back to. There's a statistic, I actually looked it up after we talked earlier, but I came across a comment somewhere that said if we all reduce the amount of driving by 10% every year, the impact in terms of sustainability is huge. It's like the equivalent, I think, to taking 28 coal-burning power plants offline for a year. So this is the sort of thing that'll do that, that'll make a difference. It's only downtown Plattsburgh, it's only one step, but it's a very important step in the right direction. So I know there's going to be a certain amount of education that'll probably have to take place for those who don't quite get it or just don't want to get it, but I don't have any doubt that it's going to work because that's what I've experienced personally. And it's wonderful, I have to tell you. So, next slide, I think that's, I wasn't going to go into this. If you have more questions, I can walk you through in a bit more detail what's happening with the massing, like along Bridge Street. The way we purposely step down the height of the building because the street drops down, so we want to be sensitive when you get to the northeast corner of the building that we're not developing a 6 or a 7-story kind of perception. And there'll be an amenity terrace there on, it's really on level 4. The top floor again is nothing more than a mezzanine, which has access to outdoor balconies to residents, but really the 4th level, if you look in the far left, you see that amenity terrace for residents.
Excuse me, when you say mezzanine, it's, what's it?
It's a code definition. So what the code says is.
So there won't be any living up there?
There'll be living up there, but from a building code standpoint, a mezzanine doesn't count as a floor. You're limited to 1/3 of the area of the primary floor below that mezzanine. That's the max square footage you can build. If you build more than that, then it counts as a floor.
Okay, but those top floors that have the whiting, those will in fact be areas?
Yes.
Okay.
The primarily be bedrooms. It could be a studio, you know, if somebody wants to have an office or something up there. But I just wanted to clarify that. From a height standpoint, yes, it'll look like a 5-story building. But from a code standpoint, no. Unless Devlin Company and the contractor come up with a different strategy and maybe how we want to build this as a construction type. So,
And I think from a zoning standpoint, it remains a 5-story building, but from a
code standpoint, right.
it becomes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's important to understand that. That's why definitions matter. And that's one of the things that drives us crazy sometimes is people have different definitions for height or story, whatever. We follow the building code as a starting point. So that's probably one of the more significant elevations. Durkee Street speaks for itself, I think, the three-building component. You can see how the grade drops from left to right, almost 8 feet. And where we have the entry there into the parking in the center is where we're almost up at first floor elevation, but not quite. So if somebody drives in there, there'll also be an entry into the lobby for the housing from that side as well, the side from the corner. Somebody parking in that area. And this shows the pedestrian walkway side. So you can see the amount of base exposed in the building. We don't show that here, but our intent is to treat that with landscaping as we shift the river walk in more of a serpentine manner away from the building and create some space to have a really nice landscape sticking on the bottom of the building, like they do in Scotland. We'll have room to do that, do something really nice, pick some appropriate plants for that. Any questions? Hopefully that gives you a little more insight.
Do you have any, renderings of the east
Turkey,
view?
Yes, we're
Looking
developing
over
that
there?
now for the next month, so you'll have that.
Also, we don't
in
have
January.
those yet.
Yep.
Yeah, if you wanted to get in the building, you gotta go all the way around, go over here to get.
So I had one, at a meeting we had,
Last month?
last month?
It
Yeah.
was last month.
Last month. One of the things that, a couple of us, if you've ever been to Dannemora, people around here kind of have a knee-jerk reaction to a wall
I
of
have-
white.
I've been through there, I have not been
Okay, well,
inside.
okay, well,
I
that's
have
what I'm
been
talking,
inside.
if you've ever
Yeah.
driven through. And so I was looking at this, and yes, there are a lot of contemporary features that I personally really like. But there's an awful lot of this white and its material is. But, you know, sitting here, I really like what you did on the brick, with, creating some above the windows.
Some lentils and banding.
Yeah, some
stone
lentils and
accents.
banding in a lighter
Mhm.
stone. I don't know what it would look like, but is there any way that perhaps you could incorporate either, you know, the brick or stone
Well,
into
yeah.
lentils or whatever?
We'd like to live at it, you know, in fact, it's hard to see here, but we have added some lentils, but, it'll depend on the budget.
Yeah, I see they're white.
Yeah.
But
So
if
we're-
they were to be, you
Mhm.
know, stone
Yeah,
and create, you know, just have
stone.
lentils of the
Right.
stone
It'd be-
over,
it'd
I
be
don't know,
good.
it would break up
Sure,
these white.
yep, it'd be wonderful, we can do that, it'll just depend on the budget, but we're certainly.
And then what's the material up here?
That's a board and batten material, vertical board and batten.
Okay, and it's gonna be painted white?
We'll see, but that's the intent now, is to keep it, it's not gonna be white, but it's gonna be a lighter color. So we can kind of diminish, again, the impact of that as a color, and as a volume.
Okay.
These are all good comments. I appreciate it.
Can you do the picture where you showed A, B, and C, where you were showing, I'm picking up this element,
Yeah,
or echoing this element from this building,
okay.
and I'm looking at those buildings, and one of the things that you had mentioned was,
Yeah.
you said, we wanna start out really big, we wanna look at the big picture, and then work our way in.
Mhm.
And so as I'm looking at this, I'm wondering, why did you happen to pick those three buildings to echo when there are so many more interesting buildings in the general vicinity in downtown, many of which are just right around the corner on City Hall Place
Yeah,
or up on Margaret Street with, again, much more interesting features that you could have been echoing
Yeah, the co-op's
than
talking
the
about.
co-op building,
Yeah, I
which,
think,
And that's not the original facade for the co-op building
Right.
yeah,
anyway.
yeah, I mean, I just,
nonetheless, those are good points, but it's there, we're not necessarily echoing. What I'm saying is that
you're trying to make it sympathetic,
Yeah,
but you're
sympathetic,
using,
but
you're
we're not-
using
Yeah.
terrible examples to pick sympathy from. That's just me, I'm a CPA, I'm not an
Yeah.
architect,
right.
but I do not like the white sections of this building.
Mhm.
It's a jarring, different style.
Mhm.
Doesn't need to match. Doesn't need to match perfectly. I realize that.
Yeah.
An example would be the addition they put on St. John's Church, which you had nothing to do with,
Right, I'm not familiar with that.
and kind of a strange effect because they did stone, but they ended up using kind of brownish stone instead of grayish stone,
Uh-huh.
and it looks odd.
Looks weird.
Okay,
It's,
it looks
uh,
weird,
it's,
it looks
uh,
bad.
It's not
It
limestone.
wasn't
Yeah.
done right, I wasn't on the
Right.
board at that point.
Yeah.
But this is permanent. Whatever you give us, we're gonna be looking at this building for 50 years.
And, you know, actually, if you walk around Plattsburgh, and it's one of the things I love to do, if you drive around our little city, the I always call them lentils, come on,
Those are soup.
I know, above,
Lentils.
the thing above your window.
Lentils, yeah.
Thank you, okay. There are some beautiful examples, some really interesting on homes
Mhm.
and on buildings.
Yep, absolutely.
And, I mean, I just came from doing the Inca Trail, so I became
Yeah.
very aware of what can be done
Yeah,
over
you have some beautiful
windows and
buildings, no
buildings.
question.
And, you know, and so when I look at that white, you know, I appreciate that, yes,
Yeah.
you know, this gives good contrast and it breaks things up, but again, it is, you know how it is up here, winters are long, and it's white, and it's bleak, and
Mhm.
if we could have more interesting, whether it's more use of stones, whether it's more use of brick.
Or color.
Exactly,
Yeah.
over the windows perhaps.
You have to be
They're
careful
because
on
you
this,
did
yeah.
that already on the corners, and it looks really good.
Yeah.
It breaks up
Okay.
the spaces, and the only thing breaking up the spaces here are the balconies, but those are just
Yeah,
dog.
there's a lot of opportunities for what we can do with the balconies, so, you know, and back to your point, you know, I don't mean to make too much of picking up in those that happen to be referenced, but, we're certainly open to looking at whatever we think is appropriate, but it's gonna come back to budget, really.
Oh,
I'd love
I
nothing
know.
more than to be able to do some of the things you're describing, but the
Well,
reality is.
but Dan O'More is not part of our style.
And
So,
that's truly for a bunch
Not
of.
my
residents.
style.
Really, yeah, I
That's,
mean,
you know, that's what hit,
this-
because it's going to be right on the sidewalk.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is really important to us.
Mhm.
You're gonna hit a big bump on the board with this,
Mhm.
getting this approved, looking like this. And I feel like we're insulting you, this is your job, this is your baby.
No, that's,
But
I need to
but
hear these things.
you need to hear this, that the middle section, interesting,
Mhm.
we're happy. End acre on the right, fine, but that cream colored stuff is just not gonna fly. And I think, you know, the part that's stepped back at the top, it's probably far enough back that it doesn't really show.
Yeah,
And if
it's
it
about,
wasn't,
it's about 8 feet back. setback.
you know, that is not that much of an impact, but the lower part that's closer to the sidewalk and really visible,
Mhm.
and really visible as you approach the corner, as you're driving, and you're looking at all the other architecture around downtown and driving, it's jarring,
Mhm.
okay? And I'm feeling like you're not in compliance with the guidelines. You think you are, I personally don't think you are.
Okay.
The other thing we wanted to talk about, it's not really part of the architecture, is we were not happy with Durkee Street being one way, and
Mhm.
I realize it creates more parking, but it also creates kind of a pain in the assness, pardon me, for anybody that's trying to get into the center of this to either park in the courtyard or in there or in the other parking area, that they're always going to have to go down Bridge Street, across Pike or across whatever's down there and back up Broad, and then make a turn to get onto Durkee, it's a huge circular maneuver to get to
Yeah.
a parking area.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that they didn't wanna make the oval one-way, something that came up, would have created a whole lot more parking spaces around the oval if we made the oval one-way, and people said, oh no, that's just too inconvenient to have to drive all the way around the oval if I live on this side and I wanna get somewhere else. They said no, even though it would have created a ton of parking spaces and perhaps prevented all the people that park on the lawn now when they go to see a soccer game from doing that. So, I know that's not part of that's a design thing, flow thing, but it was the other thing that really we were concerned with a month ago.
Even so, that's actually not part of
No,
our
that's a
project.
city
Yeah.
project.
It's,
That's a-
but we regard this as one big project and we aren't happy with Durkee being one way.
Part of the approval of this, though, does not include the approval of Durkee as one way. The board will see that separately.
Okay, but they're sort of counting on it. In other words, it's an underpinning.
They're not using the parking as part of their counts.
No, but it's part of the renderings here, it's very much
Sure.
of what makes it
Yep. This is still
attractive
conceptual
and
right
very pedestrian looking. You know, and I love that we're creating a pedestrian friendly downtown, and I agree we need to emphasize that, but keeping Durkee two-way is, from a practical measure. The other thing is you've got a couple of lights, where is lighting going to be?
And we haven't really developed that yet,
Okay.
so it's early in the
And then
process.
also, you know, the light, when you do the east view and the parking lots, would like to see what the lighting is gonna
Sure.
look like, cause that's gonna have a
Yeah.
big impact on safety and attractiveness.
Yeah, like light pollution, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we can do a really nice job, I mean, it's a lot of great landscaping, but, and then my last thing is, where are all the wires? I know there are gonna be wires, is that ever included in renderings, or do we just see
Sometimes,
those
but,
after the fact?
Is it underground utilities?
You're talking about power?
Yeah, is that, is it all gonna be underground? Oh, I love it, okay, good, I thought maybe it was gonna be above ground, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yay.
The parking that's underground, you mentioned controlled. Somebody said the word controlled. Talk to me about controlled. How is it controlled? Like gate, card, pass card, magnetic strip, can't get in unless you have one, you live there, what are we
Yeah.
talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so, so somebody that's going to a restaurant here, or going to shop,
So I think
or
that
work in one of those
the
business
three-
spaces would
the
not have a
three-
card.
The three spaces will each be controlled differently. So I think the basement garage will most likely be residents and they'll have a fob or something like that. Then the courtyard will probably be a mixture, and so I don't know. It hasn't been exactly figured out how that's gonna get controlled, but then the service lot is probably take a ticket.
Yeah,
And that'll need to get exactly how that operates. We'll need to figure out.
so I'm just thinking in terms of, safety of residents. In other words, you're in a, pardon me, probably not slightly creepy underground garage, okay? Maybe it'll be airy and lit, and, cause it's gonna be open toward the east, right? Okay?
I mean, not like,
No, no,
not
wait.
wide open, but there'll be an open air.
Open air coming through and whatever. I just think thinking safety of the residents, that
Sure.
the unauthorized people aren't able to go down in there and,
No, actually, it'll probably be closed in.
yeah,
Standpoint.
yeah. That just
Security
safety
standpoint.
concern for the,
Yep.
okay.
Okay, I appreciate your comments, I'm not offended, you know, I think this is a healthy dialogue, necessary dialogue, so. Part of my job, obviously, is trying to please multi-ethnic constituencies, so sometimes.
Like there.
Uh-huh.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's
You know,
very
something
nice.
like that, right now you've got just white,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, we'll do what we can.
something
We
to
have-
break it up and
yeah,
make it interesting.
We have to recognize though the budget constraints, and frankly, that's very much part of what you're seeing here is we spent more money on the corners at the expense of some of these, what you call the Danamora sections. and shows. I acknowledge that, okay? So, we need to be careful though about doing something that's fake. So it's gotta have a certain honesty about it. Quite frankly, I do think it's better to be honest about what's happening here in terms of balancing priorities, budget, aesthetics, et cetera. And there's a way to do, call it contemporary, whatever, you know, in a manner that fits. That's what I was saying about balancing, blending the old and the new. So there's a couple of ways we can go with this. Frankly, some of the earlier concepts were far more contemporary in terms of those sections of the building. Worked very nice, but we toned it down for the time being. But that's a very different direction, I know, from what you're thinking, Loretta. You're thinking of something that has more
Well, you look at the old
traditional.
city hall, you know,
Yeah.
which is a, Richardson design.
Yeah, beautiful building.
Beautiful building, and, you know,
Yeah.
so we've got a lot of that right in the
Yeah,
area.
we
And
can't afford
again,
that.
these, well, I understand that, but I'm just saying, when you've got these white masses of concrete,
Yeah, right. So I'm hearing a little bit more about, let's say, scale is what you're looking for. You know, I hear a concern about the color, large masses. There are ways we can deal with that, I think, without too much difficulty. You know, we have a lot of tools in our kit. But one of the things, again, we may consider is, because of economics, is perhaps a more contemporary way to address that, however we do that, you know. As I tell people all the time, this is an evolutionary process. And one of my favorite analogies is somebody's watching the choreographer, George Balanchine. Actually, it's Martha Graham made this comment about it one time. She said, watching the choreograph, the music would pass through his head and he would refract it into dance. And it was almost like a direct process for how that works. And what I'm trying to say is, if we don't hear these comments and aren't aware of them, we can't refract it into how the outcome is developed. So I welcome these comments, I encourage it, I appreciate it. So let's do the fact that it is because we want you to be comfortable too. We're gonna do the best we can to balance all these different considerations. I'm sure we will. Okay? Other questions, comments? All right, thank you.
The girls covered it well.
Yes, they did. I'm not surprised. Thank you.
Hey, I do have a question about getting back to the parking. With downtown going to paid parking by the user, do you intend to charge the public to use the parking area, the open parking area?
Yeah, I think the intent is to mimic whatever the city does generally.
Okay.
And the city's paid parking system will likely be in place by the time the prime development has been completed. So they will have a good reference point off which to base whatever structure they choose to implement.
The other thought I had in passing, the dumpster enclosure, could you move that closer to Durkee Street and have the delivery space behind it where you could dress it up, and if you have that kind of maneuvering room?
Yeah, we were
Might
looking
be.
at that, getting a garbage truck into the dumpster space is actually, can be more difficult than getting.
I don't know if you've ever seen the delivery vehicles they use in downtown Plattsburgh. Some are tractor trailers.
yeah, they're huge.
So when Loretta says it becomes an eyesore and that's what you're gonna look at as your streetscape, if we don't control what vehicles deliver and what times they deliver as a city, then I don't know how you're gonna rectify our problem. And I think it should be done throughout the downtown, quite honestly. Because these are far too large of vehicles that are delivering whatever they're delivering downtown. So I think
more at the same time. And again, especially if you're talking about a one-way street, you've got 3 or 4 of those vehicles trying to maneuver.
So I don't know, Matt, if that's a recommendation to you, but I would feel strong about at least the city addressing or studying the.
You're talking about the cordoning off of additional loading areas on street within the downtown area?
I'm talking about the possibility of regulating the size of vehicle that can deliver in the downtown core and what hours
That's
they
a
can deliver.
bigger conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bigger conversation.
But we have to ask the question, correct? Before you understand that we
Sure.
feel it's a problem.
I mean, I think it's important to talk about regulating
Yes.
loading and unloading times on-site and off-site.
Absolutely.
But as far as the whole city is concerned, it's a bigger conversation.
I mean, how do you make, say someone, you have a restaurant that is in this building, how do you make Renzi Brothers, whatever, go to that particular loading spot instead of just double
Coordinate
parking?
schedules.
Double parking like they do right now
Yeah.
and blocking traffic?
Most of those deliveries happen early or late at night anyway, so I don't think it'll be a huge problem. I mean, restaurant deliveries, I don't think usually happen during restaurant hours.
Downtown Plattsburgh,
Downtown Plattsburgh.
Renzi will park their truck on Margaret Street in the middle of the day.
And
Yeah.
Sid Weiner's truck is,
Frequently.
Frequently.
Sid Weiner's truck is,
Yeah,
although his aren't usually too big, but when Sid Weiner comes to town,
yeah.
you know, traffic's gonna be stopped for
Yeah, and as the city's parking system evolves over the next months and years, that is
We've gotta start
certainly
to-
a larger conversation
Yeah.
we do need to
It
have.
is.
Yep, absolutely.
For purposes of this project though, what we can do is when we come back and do a resubmission, is find ways that we can solve this site specific, and also we use potentially conditions of approval that would give the city enforcement powers, and give you the assurances that deliveries are happening, and that conditions of a resolution are being followed. We can brainstorm about that and maybe
Yeah.
come up with some language.
That would,
That
and
could be
again,
the
that would be
catalyst.
great, because then
Right.
that's
Change the
something that
whole
could be
map.
replicated throughout the downtown area.
Absolutely. So we'll work on that.
Gives us something to work forward from, yeah, that would,
Yeah,
That's how a lot of these issues can be addressed, so,
absolutely.
we can take a look.
I'll shut up now.
Any other board questions?
What?
We covered a lot. So-
We covered a
we
lot,
covered
yes,
a
and again,
lot
this is
of
only a
territory.
sketch right now, so approving this resolution tonight is essentially you accepting the application, recommending the applicant come back with additional details that you talked about tonight, in addition to the review comments that they've received. And I think they plan on coming back in January with more
Yeah.
details, not for final approval, but just in response to your comments tonight.
One thing, I do like the footprint of the building. I like the idea of the underground parking there. You know, we're not
Mhm.
saying, pat on the back, many of these things are very good. We're bitching about the things we don't like. But if we're not bitching about it, it's probably okay, okay? So, the courtyard in the middle, being up against the sidewalk, it's all understandable. It's a downtown area where, as I say, you know, for the most part, you can build right up to the sidewalk line. But the few things that have annoyed us or whatever we brought up, we're really serious about those few things. That's why we brought up at the last meeting, brought up at this meeting. So they hopefully get addressed. I realize there's a budget constraint, but maybe we can pull a little money out of the front and the 2 corners somehow and spend a little more money on the wider sections.
These comments incidentally are comments that we passed on for the seeker. So they, you know, they're not only comments that are here, but we felt strongly that we forwarded them to the bigger question.
Okay, sounds good. I do appreciate the
Yeah.
comments, I really do.
Okay.
It's quite beautiful. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. We'll get there.
So the next step is a motion?
Yep.
Okay. So we're looking for a resolution 2019-10 regarding a sketch plan review on this parcel.
Do we need to specify the
I think you,
detail of?
Shalice will capture all of your comments and
Got it.
questions in the discussion section of the resolution.
Okay.
make that motion? You don't wanna make it, huh? Reg, gonna make it?
Yeah, I'd
Sign it?
like to recommend approval of Resolution 2019-10 as amended based on the comments that were made during this evening's discussion.
Second?
Second. Makes sense.
Any further discussion?
Just had one question related to the public hearings for these applications. When might the board want to consider starting the public hearing process?
Talk to her.
January.
Okay, sounds great.
She puts it on the agenda and it happens, okay? And the public notices that would be required have to happen too, so.
Yep, we will,
Her job.
coordinate on that and
Yeah.
county referrals.
Are we ready for a roll call?
Loretta Rietsma,
Yes.
Marissa Gilman,
Yes.
Rick Perry,
Yes.
Reg Carter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Where in Italy is your home?
I almost feel like never knew this meeting was happening.
Because my parents had a home in Orvieto,
Loretta,
which was
we have 2 more items on our agenda.
Oh, God, no, I can't do it. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm done, we're not done.
Better than pizza.
You have a second? Yeah.
I'll see when I
I'm
get
not allowed
home.
to talk about it right now, we're still in a meeting.
Okay. It's gonna be worse if you have to get married. So this is our,
I need to come up with a system of organizing myself here at this table.
I just
It's-
mentioned to him, I think I could put red construction paper between my cases, or staple the motion to a piece of paper or something.
Yeah, we didn't have time to do that, I apologize, we should have discussed it earlier.
No, I gotta figure it out in my mind.
We will figure it out.
What is this stuff? Okay. And again, first time through,
I think we did very well for our first time.
and again, first time through even having a vote on a sketch plan,
Right.
as you said, right? So I wasn't expecting that either.
So,
Sorry.
Got more items.
moving on to, I guess it would be item 1 under other business, which is discussion of development of organizational rules.
Which we haven't read, so.
Yeah, so,
We
the
can- If
department.
you guys have time, we can walk through each section with you, obviously not reading them, but giving you the highlights for each section. I want you guys to take this with you after the meeting, make any comments that you have, so that we can formally adopt this in January.
I can email you guys a digital copy too.
Yep.
Okay.
I get it, but Shalice will run us all through the sections, just highlighting the main points.
That'd be great.
So a lot of this language is actually coming from, it originates in the city code. Some of it is pulled from some other guidance like the county. So Article 1 is just talking about, the purpose of the commission, what its objectives are. Article 2 talks about how the chairman is appointed, how members are appointed, what terms they serve, the length of the term, and I believe they are successive so that they are, one is expiring every 5 years, or.
Are we a
So-
planning commission?
There's 5, yeah, the code
That's
actually.
what
It says
identifies-
commission, not board.
Yep,
It does
the
say
code
commission.
does
Okay.
identify you as a planning commission.
Okay.
I believe we are.
You're actually identified as a planning commission with the authority and powers of planning board.
So we're commissioners.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm skimming through this.
Let me go back to alternates for a second. I think, didn't we want to have something about, the phrasing on this may be bizarre, but the alternates shall alternate?
Yeah, we actually have, we actually
Is there
cover
a section
how
in
that
there that
is.
says?
It's actually in the attendance section, I know that's weird, but,
Yeah.
it's in the attendance section is where we define how alternates are selected.
Okay.
You'll see in here, there is some draft stuff in here, section 4, I'm sorry, Article 2, section 4, talks about the vice chair. There is not actually a definition within our code currently on how the vice chair is selected, so what I've seen you guys do is just go to the next most senior member on the board.
Yeah,
And that's fine with me, I don't
Yeah.
know if it's an election, I know that there are other boards out there that do that annually, they have an election of who their
that's, the
members are.
zoning board does do that. And of course, say some issue comes up and the chair doesn't want it and the vice chair doesn't want it, okay. I imagine the vice chair can just say, I decline to be the vice chair
We
in
actually,
this particular case. Yeah,
sort of
we
had
saw
that
that,
over the
yes.
last couple months.
Yeah.
Where the vice chair decided they didn't want to
Not-
be part of that and stepped down.
Not going there, okay,
So,
yeah.
I will say that the board several months back had looked at seniority
Yeah.
as the alternative for vice chair.
Mhm.
I would
I
define
guess this is-
seniority, it's not the way I thought it was.
Seniority was
How long
the
they have
next longest,
consecutively served on the board without
it's the
regard
next,
to
the
their
next,
most recent appointment
the
date.
next longest person serving on the board. Now, once again, this is our opportunity if we
Right.
wanna do annual elections, or we want the chair to
Do an appointment,
do the appointment similar to like the alternate, the
Yeah.
chair handles the
Yeah.
sitting alternates. I mean, it's a board decision.
So that is something that just needs a definition right now, it's
Yeah.
kind of a placeholder for.
I mean,
however you wanna do it.
in my mind, when it comes down to the Article 2, those are sort of the open items with the board. I mean, otherwise, the mayor and the common council pretty much
I mean, yeah, the mayor.
set
nominates-
the other parameters.
Yeah, the mayor nominates an appointee, and then the common council, of course, votes to do that for any member of the board, or the chairman of the board is also, selected by the mayor and council.
Correct.
But the vice chair, there's just no definition currently, so, I guess it's up to you guys to decide how you're gonna.
And I think the alternates and the way that the alternates sit in our code are currently prescribed that the chair picks the alternate to sit.
Was that our code, or was that?
I'm forgetting whether it was a code, well, not you're saying it, whether it was code or it was like within the state regs. One of the two gives, or puts that duty in the chairs.
I think it was state regulations, I don't recall exactly, but it was state regulations, left it to the decision of the chair to determine who would be the alternate on an item. Typically what I've seen you guys do again in the past is just move to the most senior alternate sitting.
That's been my
sorry,
position.
Yeah.
this is the end of the day.
In here, however, we did define it, based on that precedent that you guys have been following. It's under the attendance section, Article 7.
Second to last page on the top.
Yeah, sorry, the last two paragraphs there. The first one discusses who will be an
Where the hell is
alternate
she?
if a regular
Oh.
planning, commissioner.
Which section are we on?
Second to last page on the top, two paragraphs.
Actually, we might have different versions of this
Oh.
document.
Sorry, ignore my reference.
Just what article and section?
It's okay at
Article
8 o'clock in the
Article
morning.
7,
Yep,
Yeah,
there's only one section.
one section. yeah.
okay,
Which actually probably should be amended, but, the last two paragraphs of that section, the first of those last two paragraphs talks about who will be the alternate if a regular member has to recuse themselves. Because in that event, that regular member will not be sitting for any of the subsequent hearings. So it's saying if, an alternate sits for that recusal, they should be the one to sit continually for the remainder of the hearing of that
Yep.
event.
So Loretta, you would continue to say.
The last paragraph discusses, the choosing of an alternate in the event that a regular commissioner is absent. So, for example, who's not here tonight? It's our regular, Derek. Derek's not here tonight. He would be able to resume hearing on one of these items at the next meeting if he makes the statement that he has agreed himself with the materials. It doesn't
Wait,
have
he
to
makes
be,
a statement that he has what?
that he's familiarized himself
Read the
with
minutes,
Oh,
watched
got
the
it, got it, got it.
YouTube.
materials, and he actually did, he came in last week and picked up his packet, so he would be familiar with what would be going on tonight. So, you know, a regular member's absence at the first hearing of an item doesn't necessarily mean that they have to sit for all remaining hearings.
Because it's not a recusal, it's
Right.
an absence, is what you're saying, yeah, it makes sense.
And we included Rick's suggestion, and actually I found it in the code at one point too, what you were talking about, about them making a statement
Yeah,
to the effect of that they've read the minutes and they know.
familiarize themselves with the record.
Yes.
So to use tonight for an example, I recused myself from the last 3 applications. Loretta sat in my place, so
So Loretta
she
will
would,
continue to sit in the
she will
minutes.
continue to sit in that place for the remainder of
Right.
those
Yes.
3 applications.
Yes.
Okay.
And supposing Derek is here next month, then he will take the seat as the 5th.
However, if someone misses a meeting
And Derek would be the alternate.
and Derek, or if if anybody misses a meeting and our other alternate takes that place,
So let's say
then the following month
The regular member
would come back.
Yeah, let's say next month Rick's not
Okay.
here, it would be Derek and Kurt both sitting.
Is that something that would be tracked by?
We could track it
I think that
administratively, absolutely.
Somehow we
Sure.
note it in the resolution.
In
or
our
some-
resolutions, it
somehow.
outlines who attended the meeting, who was the alternates at the meeting, so we could track that.
Especially,
Since you guys are, you know, accepting resolutions, it'll say the roll call who
Yep.
who's
Okay.
included in it, so.
Yeah,
Especially in lawsuit type.
that'd be
Sure.
great if we, we agree if we somehow note it, you know, so because I
Yeah.
mean, you know, when we have applications that go by
Yeah.
months and months, I
Right.
mean, we will.
It's like, who heard
Yeah, Jim, in
this?
the example you gave, if Loretta was not here at the next meeting, an alternate would simply replace her.
If she's
Yeah.
not here.
I mean, as a
Yeah,
practical matter.
yeah.
Unless for some reason,
I would say the alternate would take her place, and then you go back to, she was actually so the following month, she didn't recuse herself, she would return
you
and take
can
that
wind up
place.
in a situation where you don't have a quorum,
Yeah.
potentially.
Sure.
Well, we wouldn't
Yeah.
hear an item without a quorum.
Pardon me?
We wouldn't hear an item without a
I-
quorum. We wouldn't even meet without a quorum.
I think more importantly, I mean,
Based on,
We can't
vote.
do anything.
right.
The board cannot take an action if there's no quorum.
now that we're,
No, I understand. So we could have people here and not have a quorum.
Yeah,
Yeah,
could
you
have
could
members
have, you have to
not
have
have a
only
quorum.
2 people here, not, a quorum is 3 people. The full board is 5, but a quorum is only 3.
Okay.
I
Those
think
are-
we have
In
to
there
separate.
too.
now that we have a 5-member board, we're secure.
yeah.
Yeah, the chance of that is pretty remote.
Yeah, and having
got it.
quorum. I think more importantly, something the board has to consider, you know, as we move forward, is always advising the applicant of the conditions in front of them, you know what I mean? If there's 3 members here.
And you need 2 votes.
Or you need.
3.
You need 3 votes.
3 votes,
You
yeah.
need 3 votes
Yeah,
under 3
that
members.
if you'd rather take your, well, again, we used to do that with the zoning board. We used to say, if you wanna come back next month, we'll
Sure.
give you that chance when you got a full board and a better chance.
That's why I
That your odds are better.
That's why I pointed out. And keep in mind also, we haven't seen this, but, you know, you may also reach a condition where the county role in this
Right.
brings you down
Right,
to
the supermajority thing.
requiring
Yeah.
4. So
Yeah, yeah.
those are things for the board to think about as you move forward.
Can I throw out one, I know I said I would be talking more, but, one possibility, what if, you know, for instance, Marissa is here for every meeting for the DRI project, and then an emergency comes up?
I dropped dead from
No,
a
not you
cramp
drop
in the
dead.
back of my leg, yeah.
Okay, fine, she's out taking care of her leg. No. She's out screaming. No, but there's an emergency and she can't be here. But that night is going to be the vote. Is there a way that someone who has a member, a sitting member who has been at, you know, all of the discussions over a
Seniority.
period of time,
Even if you're
would still, would she be able to give a vote in absentia?
Even if you're
No,
not
I
in
think so.
attendance, as long as you're familiar with the applications by reading the documents.
Well, yeah, but what I'm
listening
saying
to
is, like,
minutes
for
in some
instance,
cases.
if Marissa's, you know, if it's gonna be a divided vote, what if Marissa's vote is going to be?
I mean, the common council has had occasions where they FaceTime or Skype somebody into the
Yeah.
meeting. If Marissa felt like doing that from her hospital bed, then we could do that.
I could
But
Well,
figure
no,
it
but I'm
out,
just
yeah.
saying, because if her vote was gonna make or break, and the alternate who was
Yeah.
coming on didn't agree with what Marissa's position was, that could
That's a real
potentially.
consequence.
That, right.
Yeah.
It's a consequence.
That's
And I
a-
think,
Really?
I think,
Yeah.
well, I'm guessing if the
Postpone.
common council has done
don't-
Skype or FaceTime
Should be good.
attendance at a meeting, they must have passed a bylaw or something locally to enable it. Because usually you have to enable it to,
Yeah, in your
you
bylaws,
need
that
to
you're gonna
make it
allow that.
I
enable.
know that, whether that's required or not, I do recall, it seemed like it was allowed. I mean, there's nothing to another location. You actually have to put it in your public notice where that if anybody is at that location, they can attend.
Do we wanna add that to our bylaws?
If you're in.
I think,
I mean, this is bizarre
It
stuff.
is,
Yeah.
it is, I'm just,
I think at this point, we keep it simple.
yeah.
If we, if we get to the, if we, no, that's okay, I mean, those are good points.
It's just,
I
a project like this is so important. If there was someone who would be sitting in for someone who's got a very strong opinion, and the person who's gonna sit in for that person, someone's gonna sit in for Rick, who doesn't agree at all with Rick's
Well,
position,
Hope,
and
hope,
that either makes a break, and then the vote goes the other way,
I don't
that's,
think it,
Oh.
I don't know that necessarily
not sitting
matters,
in
because
for
you're all
commission,
entitled to
you're
your own
sitting in.
opinions,
Sure.
your own vote, and
Yeah.
so.
Sounds like one of those false electors, huh?
It's
Right, voting for the,
volunteer board.
not the
Yeah.
guy that you were elected to vote
I'll,
for.
I'll,
Take
I'll-
the chances, that's why.
I'll say as a board member, hopefully we haven't, I don't know, televised our opinions to that point in a proceeding that we're starting to think that one board member sitting over another, and we don't get to that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Absolutely.
And this is-
honestly,
I mean,
Yeah,
this
it's
is a
not
good
big
reason to
enough
put this
for-
in the bylaws, so that we don't have a situation where somebody's like, well, I want this alternate instead of another one.
Right.
You know, if we have a process and a procedure we're following, there's no question of,
Oh, they picked them because they're pro.
because we think that they're
Right.
pro this project
Yeah.
or.
Exactly.
Do you need to
Yeah.
put
Exact
the
point.
education requirement in here, but you don't because it's already in the code?
Right.
That the addressing how much education it
We
carries
actually,
over
I
and,
think we brought that up, like, I think we mentioned that the other day about putting the training requirement in.
Oh, training requirements,
Um,
yeah.
and the fact that it carries over, if you do a whole bunch in 1 year,
We can add it, sure.
I mean,
carries
we can-
over.
we can.
You're really just re-echoing what's already in the
A
code, but,
lot of it is actually just re-echoing what's in the
Yeah.
code and just pulling it into one
Okay.
section because it's kind of scattered throughout the code right
Yeah.
now.
But that also makes, that this would be, an all-in-one encapsulation
Yep.
for a new person coming on board, to
Sure.
be able to read it, and, I was not aware of the educational requirements. That's fine, I just,
Yeah.
thank God for them, but I wasn't aware there were.
No, that's good, good suggestion, so we can have that.
I have a question for you. In Article 3, Section 6, it says that we, the city planning commission, shall have the authority to call upon departments, agencies, employees. Great. Then it goes on to say down at the bottom, such department, agency, or employee may be reimbursed for any expenses incurred as a result of this assistance. This is always like a contention. I know there's other sections of our code that somehow give the planning board some type of budget. Do we wanna just be careful on how, any kind of, because we really don't have any.
What would be an example where we would incur a fee for consulting with a?
say we
another
wanted an
department?
opinion other than Dean Schneller's, okay? We wanted to get Joe Lavorando
So
in
like
here.
Mark Schechter and
I mean,
Silver.
Whatever,
Just
okay? We
call
wanted to
them.
get somebody else's opinion.
Actually,
Where does that come from?
actually, to tell you the truth, that is a good point. If we had an idea of where we as a board felt we needed some type of third party, but it wasn't necessarily tied to an application or anything like that. You know what I mean? There's another section of the code that actually gives, we read
Yeah.
that points out like a budget we have, but
No,
Isn't this
yeah.
talking more about internal resources?
Yeah.
So in this case, the legislative body is the council, is that correct? So if we just struck that sentence, would that address this and correct it?
Citizens as shall be deemed necessary and as shall be authorized.
I think it's the last sentence that's a
Actually,
question.
no, he's right about
Yeah.
the legislative body.
Yeah,
because
struck
we're
the
not
last sentence.
legislative.
Deemed.
This is not a legislative body.
I don't know.
I interpret this to mean that you would need to be authorized by the council
To spend some money to
before we
get,
could make that
yeah.
direction. And the budgetary consideration would not be this board's, it would have to be dealt
I
with
mean, I
by
think
the
what
council.
it's saying is, if the common council gives you the authorization to do that, then you have the authority to.
Right.
Actually-
Yeah, and actually, I believe that's in the code, and isn't that what's in the budget
Yeah,
section we saw?
yeah.
Actually, to tell you the truth, I believe it says that it gives the planning commission the authority to do it, and as authorized by the legislative body. So it's saying you have the authority to do it, and like
Okay.
almost like if the legislative body gave you more authority. That's the way I read that. But in this case, though, there is language in our code already that authorizes us
Yeah.
to
It
some.
authorizes you guys to spend, but then you have no budget.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the
Right.
whole point. That's the
Right.
whole. So I don't want to create another scenario like that. Anyway,
I mean, I think that section that you were talking about with the budget, though, that probably existed before the professional fees, law
Right,
was
so now we get
enacted last year.
reimbursed.
now
Oh, it's been in there forever, what,
Professional fees.
1965 or something, probably,
The-
it's
the-
been in there forever.
that's my other question now. In at least two prior applications, the board had to authorize professional services, had to request specifically what professional services we were looking for. Now, I know that, Melena, your department is going to recommend, but we had to like formally request it and then request that you go out for proposal. How are we going to handle that process moving forward?
As far as going out for proposal, what was the precedent with McDonald's? Did you just informally reach out to a
I
few
think they
different
authorized,
firms?
I think they made a motion to authorize Eva to seek and hire a consultant for the third-party review.
We can do that in January for the stormwater.
Yep, we did that for McDonald's and
Through Circle Grove.
and Three Circle Grove. We did it for both. We
So
authorized.
we'll add it to the comments for next month, that, you need to authorize the department to seek third-party review for stormwater.
Here's the biggest thing, timing. We wanna make sure
Throws
with.
another month into the monkey
we-
wrench of
well,
it,
we
yeah.
wanna we wanna make sure with our applicants, whoever's applying, that we understand, because if we wait, it took, how long did it take us to get proposals and actually get a retainer and get it
For
moving?
McDonald's or for Three Circle Grove?
Both?
We got the proposals within like a week or two turnaround for both. It was a very quick turnaround. I mean, not as quick as the applicant wanted in those situations, but
We have an extra month in between for this one.
yeah, it was about a week or two to get the proposals. The work, Three Circle Grove, it was all said and done. They were hired, we got the escrow and everything was done within about a month, maybe a month and a half. But I think some of that was because it was Thanksgiving, Christmas, holiday season. McDonald's, that one definitely didn't go quickly.
I was gonna say, so my recollection, once again, a month and a half between proposals, reviews. I mean, that translates to 2 or 3
But
months.
that's also because we
That
went
seems
through a
crazy
process
to
of
me.
seeking
I've
out
never seen
multiple
that
things.
before.
If we actually have the ability within our procurement policy to just select one.
Right.
So,
We need to do
honestly,
proposals.
the turnaround from once we actually started with, was GPI Greenman Peterson,
Yeah.
the Three Circle Grove, when we started with them, it was a quick turnaround once we got them. I got the escrow and started that.
For large development, we've typically seen at the town we used to, it was a 2-week turnaround with LaBerge.
So.
As long as the stormwater is submitted with the application.
So my point is that we're somehow thinking about this as we move forward for all applicants, after seeing 2 of them that the board has
Right.
been involved with. I I am not feeling it is a good process for people that are, or the applicants that are coming to
No.
us. You know, I would not expect, once again, even a month-long process from the time, I mean, once again, if it takes you 2 weeks, based on our submission schedule, you're already missing a month of meeting time.
Well,
If it
it's
takes a
almost
month-
like
if it takes a
when you
month
look
and
at
a
an
half-
application, that you flag it right away. This is
No,
a,
we do, when we
Yeah.
review applications, we say, all right, this needs 500-foot letter, this needs stormwater review, this needs, you know, referral to the county. We do that when we receive applications, so we
Yeah.
know it's coming ahead of time and the deadlines that we need to meet. And this one knows.
I guess it depends then, I don't know how the town did it, I wasn't on that board. Do they get authorization from the board to hire
Nope.
third party, you just do it?
Just did it.
So in the town, based on my experience in the town, they just have one long-term consultant that's done it since.
There was no formal contract.
And they just, that's all they use. They don't go to proposal, they don't.
We don't need to do the proposals, I think Eva did it as
And-
just a
and
best
actu-
practices.
And actually, the town, in the town, the applicant receives a formal. The correspondence, but they receive a formal invoice letter for the services as well. Afterwards, they don't have an escrow.
Right.
I don't know how that's done. I know that,
I don't, so, I think the law, the professional fees law, I think that it required this, but I can't remember.
Whatever our code says, obviously we'll follow that.
so the biggest thing is I just wanna make sure in our bylaws that it's clear how the board's involved with this. If the board isn't involved with it, it's just, you know, based on planning staff needs, you get third-party review.
Maybe that could be
And-
the blanket statement.
But I don't think,
Recommendations?
I don't think the local law is set up that way. I think the local law is set up that the board has to make a decision on it in terms of the
Okay, we can
third-party
look that up.
review. So let's just make sure that our
Yep.
local law and our procedure
same.
go well.
Yep.
Yep. And then make sure that we're cognitive and timely about our actions,
Yeah.
if we need to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only thing I can tell you about the invoicing thing is I know that they set it up deliberately not to do it that way because they did not want the city being left with the bill, which is what happened with Margaret Street. Upper Margaret Street where I think Plattsburgh Commons is or whatever that is, I don't know. Right near the creek, something about the city ended up with a bill for a third party professional service for an application and
I believe that
they did not want the city fronting any bills anymore. That's why there's an escrow set up now.
okay.
Makes sense.
I think however the city has it in place. I mean, I think there's multiple ways to look at that.
Sure.
The town just has multiple hurdles that you don't move if you don't
Yeah.
pay it, so. Okay. Any other comments in terms of procedures? And, I mean, everybody has a chance to review this
Yeah,
over
we'll
the next
email it to you
month.
so you can
and-
look at
Yeah,
it.
and we'll-
Need some time to digest
The
it.
only
Yeah.
other thing that was in there that was different or was defined more was, we do have language in there about, you know, the typical language that's pulled right out of the code about missing 5 meetings in a year. But there's also a section that says a member misses 3 consecutive unexcused absences.
Article 7, Section 1.
Yeah, that will be deemed to have resigned, so that's 3 unexcused absences consecutive. Which I feel like I've not seen that happen since I've been here.
I have not either.
I don't even recall seeing that happen in the town. Typically, I know there's gonna be times where people can't make it, and there's a difference between unexcused and excused absences, which we actually included a little bit of definition there too. You know, there was one month, I think back in June, maybe, where Jim had to recuse himself from every item on the agenda. So, that is marked in our attendance calendar as an excused absence. You know, I know there's gonna be medical emergencies, I think there's been months where some members have had things like that, so those would be considered excused. I even think we put up to 2.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Very
Merry
good.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas, man.
Just wanna make sure my
Oh, yes, thank you, I don't have mine.
So So unexcused, I won't be at the meeting next month. Is that unexcused?
No, you're telling us you have an excuse. It's not like you're not showing up.
Okay, okay. I'm just making sure, you know.
I think we put like up to 2, I think I put for travel, but like we could just, you know, up to 2 absences without any reason at all.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, other than a person, once again, a member telling you, I won't be here, how could you have an unexcused?
I think.
Unless you define what unexcused is.
Yeah.
I think it's to avoid, you know, we want people here that are gonna be committed to being here, because there are gonna be times where applications are rolling over multiple months. We're not the zoning board where it's just, you know, out and in and out. So we don't want people that are uncommitted or unable to commit to a certain number of meetings. If somebody's traveling so often that they can only make it maybe every other month, they're missing a lot for that. I mean, without some sort of definition there,
Okay.
you know, I get, you know, especially around holidays or something like that, people are gonna travel occasionally, so I wanna include some leeway in there, but we should sort of limit it somewhere.
One of the things about limiting it though is that then all of a sudden, you know, you've got cutoffs that you may well start making exceptions to, and then you make an exception once and you're gonna make an exception every time. I mean, if there was some language to the effect where, you know, perhaps the chairman, or the chairman and the mayor, you know, if there's some kind of concern about commitment, and I don't know a way to, because then, you know, you start getting conspiracy theories, but,
I mean, I guess that's where it comes to an unexcused versus an excused absence. If somebody has some sort of emergency, then we obviously want to be understanding of that. That's not, you know, a planned thing.
yeah, I mean, is it, you know,
But if somebody has
does
so
the
many
board
planned
want to put
absences
itself in the
before?
position of deciding what an excusable absence is, as opposed to, you know, you have to come before and, sorry, we don't consider that excusable.
Well, I don't think you're gonna have, you know, a lot of definition around that.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it
think,
just gets
you know,
really
it's one of
tough.
those cases where let comments prevail.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, right now, the board, over my time, has already dealt with, you know, and sort of let go, attendance, I will say, in a few different instances. And
I mean, I
you just-
had
we've
three
just
things right
notified
off the
and
bat
you work
joining
through it.
this that
Yeah.
I couldn't avoid, and I wasn't here, and I got kicked off, I could not be here
But I
3
mean,
times, and so, you
without
know,
discussing what they were, I mean, you provided the reason, and those were, I believe the majority of them were excused, would have been.
I guess, I mean, I don't remember, I couldn't be here, it was what it was.
Once
It's a
again,
volunteer board, you know, it's not my job, it's,
I think the biggest thing is just setting once again, a parameters and, something reasonable to go by, so that everybody on the board understands it and we can work with it accordingly. We don't wanna end up with scenarios where we have members that just don't come for 6-8 months. I mean,
well, yeah, but I think that's covered, I mean, I read that, that's covered in there, you
Yeah.
can't do that.
So, well, so everybody, we've got,
We've got this,
this
right?
was my last thing, yeah.
Okay.
So we've got it, everybody can review this, we'll
Yeah.
take it up next month.
But you're not gonna be here, Jim?
Oh, no, I'll be here.
Oh, you will.
I was just saying, that was an
Just kidding.
example. I'll be here.
But it does say, I mean, if you have to be present for 6, so regardless of whether, you know, if you're gonna miss more than 6 meetings, excused or unexcused, you're off the board.
Right.
So the language is clear.
I mean, that's already in the code, that's.
Right, so
that.
that, you know, that's, I think that kinda takes care of non-committal, doesn't really care, and at that point, you're off.
So, I would generally agree with you.
I'm sorry, what?
I would agree with you. Yeah, that's probably the case. So with that said, last thing we have is the planning and zoning calendar, which I'm assuming you want us to say yes on this so that you can adopt
I
it.
think we
This,
had decided before that you guys are gonna start adopting that in the organization.
And the time
Didn't we
change
vote on
thing,
it? I
right?
thought we voted on it, that we approved it.
We discussed it, but
Oh,
there was never a
I forgot.
vote.
Formal
Yeah.
adoption.
so in this case, we are looking at planning board work sessions to start at 5:30. Start planning board meetings at 6 o'clock. We still meet on the 4th Monday of every month. the county deadline precedes the planning board deadline every month.
4 days.
Okay,
Our deadline is almost always the Friday after the county
The
deadline.
project will either be delayed a month or they'll have to submit early to us.
Yeah.
For referral.
I mean, truthfully, in my mind, that's on the applicant to make sure
Absolutely, and I
that the
think that note is
coordination.
for the applicant, correct?
Yeah, that's on the applicant to coordinate and make sure that they,
Yep. One little side
Are
note I
clear.
will add here, as you can see, our submittal deadline for January is December 27th, but we're actually going to accept applications a week after that due to the holiday.
I got one other question as well, when, now that we're talking about county, planning board. How does the county planning board referral work?
What do you mean?
I've seen it many different ways out of
The
this board.
500-foot
But
or
when and how,
500
like,
M, whatever it is.
We identify it at
I
sketch
don't wanna
plan
send them
review,
anything until
So
you
can-
guys have pretty much gone through a sketch and
but it doesn't
if
get
they
sent
haven't
till
come and you
detailed.
guys haven't had a look.
so can you get county referral on a sketch
No.
plan resolution?
Nope.
Okay,
So it doesn't get referred until the second round of applications, so the detailed review. Once we receive that for your review, we say, oh, this needs county review, we send it to them simultaneously that we're reviewing the project for you.
so you can't, so essentially, until the planning department deems a complete application
Yep.
that's gonna come to us, you don't get county referral?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, that's more of a procedural thing. I sometimes feel like I've seen like preliminary plans that go to county referral, but we don't have a lot of input on that.
No, typically, I mean, we wouldn't send it until it was a complete application that
Maybe
included the secret
prior
review.
to you,
Oh, okay.
prior to you being Mayor Molina.
One thing I do wanna point out is
I
the
used to
county
submit
deadline
a
is
time of application
frequently
submittal.
the same night as our
That,
meeting.
that's
So
exactly what I'm saying.
people
Building
that are gonna
inspector's
be
office does
sketch
it.
review first, and then they're gonna have to,
They have to wait.
they're gonna have to wait another month. It's gonna be a 3-month process for them.
So, to Rick's point,
Sorry.
you know, they submitted a time of application submittal. So in the past, you know what I mean, if we had a sketch application, it came in front of the board, it might have been referred. You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to make sure that if we, you know what I mean? Whatever referral, or whatever we consider a final application here at the board, then it gets
Then
referred
it gets
to the.
referred,
It's
correct.
even on the building permit application, because remember, all of this is initiated by the building permit application.
Yes,
That's the way it's supposed to.
by referral.
That's, yeah.
Okay.
Can I also pose the idea of just not holding a December meeting at all, period, ever?
I don't have a problem with a December meeting.
I know that we have a couple members that will consistently not be here every December.
I,
I'm
Our
likely
fourth week-
consistently not to be here at Thanksgiving, okay? So,
I personally think,
Yeah,
hon-
that's my
honestly,
vacation time.
as a board member, I mean, we've generally, although as volunteer, we've signed on for a monthly board meeting. That's my,
And it's the
my
schedule,
feeling
I mean,
about it.
you know, if you're figuring out when you're gonna spend a weekend in Montreal, it isn't gonna be one of these, you know,
and if it is, if
Yeah.
it's something you can't, then we.
Is there
give you-
anything that we're violating if we were to, for instance, in November and December, make it the 3rd?
We can't make it the 3rd because of the zoning board meeting. They need the room. and the-
So,
yeah.
yeah, you know, it is what it
I
is.
think it is what it is as well, and I think it's unfair to the applicants to not.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's too, you know, especially
I would
like with
agree.
what we've got going on right now, it's,
I know, it's your vacation time.
I
but
know.
I'm sorry.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, I just have to come in for one random day during my 2 weeks. 2 days, because then I have to come back and do it.
Okay.
The only thing I would add to that discussion, you're talking about missing meetings, I would